Good evening. Welcome to School Committee for August 20th, 2014. It's 7:35, coming to you live at home. So welcome. Forgive my abbreviated attire, just came off the practice field. So we'll start with the approval of minutes for July 21st, 2014. Can I have a motion to approve the regular session minutes, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the regular session minutes for July 21st, 2014.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? No questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And we have executive session for July 21st, 2014.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the executive session held on July 21st, 2014.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Student communications. Well, we're not back in session yet, so I don't see our students here. So hopefully when we resume on September 8th, I think, if that's the date, we...
Because he already has been elected and he has been here.
Right, great. Look forward to that. Any other communications?
Yes, I left at your place tonight. There were two letters that came to the school committee email. And they came late this afternoon, and so I copied them back to back in your packet. Both of them are related to the turf field discussion topic. And also, there is a very brief note that Fox 25 is zip tripping to Hingham. I guess a lot of people know what that means. I had to rely on one of our staff to explain it. But they'll be at the bathing beach, or at least at the bandstand next Friday, a week from Friday at 10:29. I guess they're there for about 4 hours, and all kinds of festivities, and people welcome to drop by. That also was in your email box, so you have that.
Great, thanks. And there were also 3 additional communications that were received by email that I forwarded to everybody.
So I think everyone now has the complete set of anything that came
in the
through
last
the website.
day or two, yeah.
Right.
I agree. Great. Questions and comments from the audience? No? Okay. Go into superintendent's report, Dot.
Yes, you have a copy of the hot off the press newest enrollment projection. And what you should notice first about it is the absence of red. The past ones, I have indicated in red the places where, we could wish that the class sizes were a bit smaller, and in fact, there's only one red block on here, which is amazing, but I also know that we've got a week or so more to go, and those things could change. So I would point out that the kindergarten number is still low as compared with last year's, and if you look over to the left-hand side, where you have kindergarten and then there's a little arrow, and below it 297. That was last year's kindergarten number. So that 297 has grown to 352 students in grade 1. So there's a bump up of 55 students, and so that pattern tends to be continuing. So down at the bottom, 1,999, 93 students in all. And if you look over to the left in that same row, when we opened school last year, we were at 2069, so that is actually 76 fewer students. But the important thing to note is the reason that it's 76 fewer really is only 2 factors that impacts 2 grades. One is a kindergarten class that's about 50 smaller, and the other is the 388 student class that moved on to the middle school is gone, but all of those other grades are comparable to what they have been. So there's not really a decline in anything except we have a 5th grade moving out and a smaller, much smaller kindergarten moving in for this year. I did want to point out an important thing about that kindergarten to grade 1 number. We're going to be having some discussion, obviously, when you have our planning meeting about the potential for a full-day program and what that might mean. And as I've been working on a report and giving you some information, we have 4 in each building, so a total of 16 purpose-designed kindergarten spaces in our buildings. That's the way they were designed. And so if we had 16 kindergarten classes that were full day, the maximum you'd like to see is 20, so that's 320 students. And yet, look at the classes that we have in recent years going through from grade 1 on. So it's an important number to keep in mind in terms of our capacity.
The question on that kindergarten number, I seem to recall that not this past year, but a year before, we also had a dip in kindergarten and then a big spike in first grade.
That's right. So the kindergarten, and I have a graph that will be part of my report. So you see that the kindergarten number is fluctuating, but the grade 1 number
is the same.
Is growing.
So I think that's most likely it's a result of people putting their kids in all-day kindergarten.
I think a lot of it is that.
Kind of an up and down.
So on the second page, or on the back of the sheet that you have, are the projections for the high school and the middle school. And I always say at this point, they're soft numbers, particularly the high school one. They're the students who last spring or in early summer filled out a program. So these are students for whom we have a schedule. And when I say that I think they're soft a bit on the high side. But the significant one that I'm most concerned about is if you look at grade 6, 388 students moved out of grade 5, and about 2 weeks ago we had 15 fewer at grade 6 students who were going off to private school or going somewhere else, and now that number is back up to 384. So as we were doing our planning, even looking at FTEs and so on, and the program for 6th grade, we made the assumption we'd probably have at least 20 fewer 6th graders than we had 5th graders, and that does not seem to be the case. On the one hand, we shouldn't be surprised because it is a new building, and perhaps people who are thinking of private school might be thinking, let's give this a try, and it's a beautiful space, and so on. So certainly that is a number to watch. So we have middle school up, high school up. I think the high school number is fairly soft. We typically are on the high side in high school. And so, and elementary down, so 57 more students. And our average has been about 60 students a year for the last 10 plus years. So that's typical with what one would expect. In terms of staffing, we're moving along well with our staffing. Our professional staff is just about all in place. We have 23 folks who have signed a first contract with the Hingham Public Schools. 3 of them began their career here in the middle of last year. So they're not totally new, but they haven't been through the orientation period before. And 9 of the 23 have had some other employment with us in the past several years. And that would be as a paraeducator or a substitute or a student teacher or something of that sort. So we have some known experience with these folks, which is always great to get young people that know our system and we know them and what they can do, and they have proven over the years to be a real asset. And it also is a good opportunity for kids to get some good experience under some very good teachers, and we are the beneficiaries in the end of that. We have a couple of openings here, and we still have a couple of custodial openings. Custodial openings, we had 5 positions in all, one of those being a half-time position for retirement, but we had some moving around. So every time we move someone, then the opening moves to a different place. So we're still working on the custodial pieces. And the 2 positions here, we've made good progress. I would say we're not ready to make announcements, but we've made good progress in the last couple of days. The pools there were smaller pools. And of course, we were looking for someone with Munis experience, and we were looking for someone that had a comparable role in a school, and we didn't find either of those things, but we've identified a couple of folks that we think are going to have a lot of potential to learn and grow in this system. And I just can't say enough about what John has had to do in the last several months in terms of getting payrolls. Everybody's getting paid, and our bills are getting paid. Sometimes they've been a little late, and the warrants have been getting done, but not easy, and we all should be appreciative of his many extra efforts.
Thank you, John.
Ribbon cutting ceremony was, of course, this afternoon, and I think it went well, except all the sunburned foreheads evident around us. But a lot of positive comments from people walking about the building this afternoon. Every August, I send a newsletter to all 600+ of our staff, and you have a copy of it there. It's just information about the things that we're looking forward to as we begin the year, some of the projects that we've done over the summer, some of the plans that we have. So I do always send a copy to Carol Meyer, so you may see some of these things in one of her articles. And I also, because it is news that's of things that have occurred mostly over the summer, I send copies to the Education Subcommittee of AdCom through the chair of the AdCom, and also to the Board of Selectmen, and your copy is there as well. The last thing I want to mention is something that just came across my desk this afternoon. I think most of you are aware that there has been recently appointed a Chapter 70 Foundation Budget Review Commission. And that's something that has been needed for a long time, and finally the appointment has been made. And recently, I saw in an article the names of the people appointed to the commission. So the Mass Association of School Committees has put together a draft position for input to the work of this commission, and I suspect that MASC will likely do a similar kind of thing. So I think it's worth reading to see what the position of the School Superintendents Association is, and you may or may not differ with it, but I'd be interested in feedback that I can pass along. But I think the other good thing about having this all in one place is it gives you a better sense of what the components of Chapter 70 really are, and how adjusting them will make the foundation formula more realistic. It hasn't been changed in many years, and really needs some updating to be relevant to today's costs. On the other hand, as much as we want it to be more relevant and more balanced and more realistic, unless there's more money put into the overall pool, there likely in that kind of balancing would be some winners and some losers. So I think it's well worth reading. It's a fairly readable thing, and if you do have comments or thoughts, you might do one of two things. One is communicate them to MASC if they're things that you think that MASC might take a position on, or communicate things to me that I can forward then back to MASS. This afternoon when I got back from the ribbon cutting, it had the fall coaching assignments in my mailbox, and so I did copy those and have those for you this evening as well. And that's it.
Dr. Gallo.
Yes.
When I read the newsletter to the August newsletter, refresh my memory. What's the STEM initiative, STEM, at the middle school?
Well, STEM, you've probably heard that term before. It stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so a lot of schools, and certainly the DESE, are always focusing on STEM initiatives and STEM programs. And so we reorganized the grade 6 program at the middle school a bit for next year. And as one of the additional parts of an exploratory program, 6th graders will have a class, I'm not sure it's one, I think it's one class in each of the 4-day cycles, that will be a STEM class, and it will be taught by Tim Siokas. And Tim is a middle school teacher, has been at 6th grade and taught both math and science, the ideal person to teach something like this. And this afternoon at the ribbon cutting, I was going to do a trivia question. And this is the trivia, and I'm sorry I didn't, because most of you didn't notice what I'm going to talk about. But in one of the big display cases, as you enter the new building and you pass by the auditorium, there's a gigantic display case. And as I was there the other day, I noticed all these little things in it. And I don't have a great aesthetic sense. I'm certainly not a decorator, but I was thinking, why are all those little objects in this big display case? I thought you're supposed to put big things in big spaces. But there was a chess set, black and white little pieces, about this big, and there was a pink piggy bank, and there was some sort of a small vase with a daisy or some kind of flower sticking out of it, and there was some sort of a curly-Q serpent of some sort. And I couldn't figure out what they all were. They were obviously nicely placed, not just thrown in there. And so the trivia question was going to be, what do all of these things have in common? Did anyone happen to see that display case? You probably wouldn't, because they were...
I saw the chess pieces, I didn't see the rest.
Yeah, well, they all have something in common. So, do you know what they are, Liza? Okay. So, what it turned out that they were, and it relates to the STEM question, is that through HEF grant process last year, and Andy, you will like this story especially, Tim Siokas put in a grant for a 3D printer. And the 3D printer comes with plastic, I think they call it yarn, and you feed it in, and you, of course, have to feed into the printer a design for whatever the object is you're creating, and out come these things. So everything in there was made by the 3D printer, as the teacher has been exploring it. So pretty exciting for
Can I
kids.
just chime in on the
Sure.
reason? The reason why Dr. Gallo mentioned the 3D printer is in case you've seen it up in Marblehead. There's a father, Paul McCarthy, and his son, Leon. Paul is a very close college friend of mine, and his son was born without a few fingers. And the father, it's gone viral, he's been on Good Morning America, he's toured the United States, where he's used this printer, 3D printer, to create a prosthetic hand. And he was very instrumental in, he shared with us, which I forwarded to Dr. Gallo, the grant that they wrote up at the Marblehead schools to get this 3D printer. Because at that age, when you're growing so quickly, you can make a hand for $10, $20, or these fingers, until you become of age and everything. So it went viral, but so that's why Dr. Gallo has shared with me about that we're moving forward. So it's a very happy story all around.
And that piece of technology, you know how expensive medical equipment is and so on, that piece of technology is under $5,000 a printer. So very exciting, and middle school kids, I think, particularly will be very excited about that. So that's part of the STEM program.
Thank you. That's a lot. Okay, moving on to unfinished business. So we have a number of policy items that we did review last month for the first time that are up for approval this evening. Dennis, do you want to walk us through those?
Yeah, I mean, all of these were discussed with the exception of the video surveillance policy at last time. We did make some refinements and edits, as I think we talked about when we were here last time. So I would, at this point, rather than reading through everything, if anybody has any specific questions, I don't think it changed, it
The
changed
one that we
the content
changed
at
the
all.
most was 2.1.
Right.
And the change there was relative to using the language that's actually in the Corey law as to who needs to be Corey'd and ultimately also fingerprinted in the category of folks like contractors and volunteers.
It was suggested that we have a policy that the world should change, so we didn't have to do things like Corey and whatever, but it probably is beyond our scope in here to make that happen. So any questions about, yeah, sure.
I'm just noticing now. So at the bottom, after we vote on this, do we then add today's date?
We usually do that after we vote,
Yeah.
Right.
on all of them, but that's a good point, Carol.
So on 7.1 on the Corey policy, if you look through that, again, if there's any questions, and then we can move on to maybe vote on that and then go on to
Yeah,
7.2.
we do them individually.
Right, exactly.
So would you like to make that motion?
I would. I'd like to move that we accept the policy 2.1 as revised.
Do you want me to second? I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Okay, so if you want to move on to item 7.2, which is draft provisions to policy number 6.13, has to do with student discipline. If you'll remember, that has to do, again, with changes in the law and what we are required to do. And we're just trying to bring this in concert with current legislation.
If anyone is interested in knowing more about the exclusions and the suspensions and the difference between them and what the law has changed that, I have a wonderful slide presentation. I'm only going to do it if there's a committee-wide acclaim that you want to see it, but I do have that. Anyone would like as an individual to see it.
If,
A second? Did you
Yeah.
make a motion?
unless, if there's no questions on that,
I have no questions, anyone?
okay. So I'd like to move that we accept the draft revisions to policy 6.13.
A second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
And the third one here, 7.3, it has to do with student activity accounts, and if you'll remember, the only change here really is, when we did this back in June of 2013, we changed the limit in the high school during the February 1st to June 30th time period, because there's a lot of things that are year-end that require them to keep larger amounts in their accounts. We did not change the middle school at that time, and it's become apparent that we need to do that as well, and that's why it's proposed here to go from the regular $15,000 limit to raise to $25,000 only from February 1st to June 30th. Nothing else changed here. So, any questions about that? So I'd like to move that we update policy 4.3.4, student activity agency accounts.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay.
So those new policies, there's one more, sorry.
Yep, there's one more, which is, let me just put it here.
Actually, this is,
Right, it's the first time.
That's the end of the adopted
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
policies.
Right, so that was a new one.
That's moving on to
Got
new
it.
business. This is going to be the first reading of a proposed policy change,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Actually, a new policy that we didn't.
I thought, you're exactly right.
Right.
So we had very limited policies with respect to
Yeah.
video surveillance
Only
before,
for
only on
Right,
buses.
so.
So this is an
so
expanded policy.
If we move on to 8.1, you have here in front of you what will be policy 7.1.1, video surveillance. And what we did here, as Ray just alluded to, the only thing we had about surveillance previously was about buses, because we previously had video surveillance on the buses. Since we've just now put, how many cameras in the schools?
65 to 70, 65, 65.
Plus in the middle school?
Middle school's got about 100, yeah.
Yeah, so close to 200 cameras now will be in the schools, all in public areas. We're mostly outside in grounds, but now a number also inside the schools. So we decided, felt it was necessary to have a policy, and this policy was, the bones of it, if you will, came from Norwell. So we looked at their policy and a couple of others. We thought this was the closest to meeting our needs. We changed it around to be in the format. You'll see that first there's a statement of purpose as to why we're doing this. And it's, primarily for safety and safeguarding our possessions and the children in the schools, the people in the schools. Then there's a second part, 7.1.1A, in the procedures, talks about retention and access to the video. And the short answer, and you'll have a chance to look at it, is that most of this will only be retained for 30 days. The only time we retain for more than 30 days if there is some type of potential litigation or some type of dispute that might require that the need for that footage, and and as soon as that would be resolved, then that would be destroyed as well. So, and the access would only be used when something arose that we needed to access it. It's not, and then would be again, no longer retained. So, again, it's, there's a lot there, but that's kind of the gist of it. And I don't know if, Carol, if you wanted to add anything to that?
You covered it.
Okay, good.
I have a question. So this is based on an existing policy that Norwell adopted?
Yes.
So there are a number of, particularly in the procedures section, there are a number of things that focus on legal matters? Are we safe enough to rely on Norwell's policy, or do we need to have council look at whether what we're saying that addresses legal issues is appropriate?
The legal issues are really just in relative to the retention of the retention of a file, such that if it's subpoenaed by legal law, if there's an investigation going on, we could keep those clips of data, but otherwise they'd just be written over. So there's not a lot of legal reference aside from the retention aspect of how long we will retain. We'll only retain if there's something sitting out that is.
I just, for instance,
I would
item.
echo Ray's concern. When I read this, if you go to section 4, sub C, it seems as if the statement, the rights of the parents and students, rights of student records will be consistent with state law and regulation. I usually have seen chapter and verse. That strikes me as rather...
Well, for me, what struck me more is, for instance, item number 3, it essentially says, we're setting forth a procedure that says the right to inspect is limited to X under these circumstances. Can we say that under the law? For instance, for A, certain people may view the video without first having to receive permission of other individuals. Is that true under the law? There are privacy concerns that, and maybe Norwell looked into this, and I just looking at it quickly in preparation, those things jumped out at me as maybe we should.
Yeah, wouldn't be a bad idea.
That's probably a good idea, yeah. Because, I mean, I never know if the law has changed either, but I was in Norwell when we did this, but but that's a good point. We should probably have it checked out.
Yeah, I think on the one that you're citing, Ed, that saying it's consistent with state law is probably might be the better way to do it, because otherwise we'd have to update it every time, every time the chapter or whatever changed, but.
Right, because law does evolve and gets amended from time to time, so as long as it indicates it's consistent with current state law or then existing state law, that would be.
So we'll make a request of the selectmen to use town council too.
Yes, I would think so.
Any other questions or in that regard?
The only other comment I would have is once we do decide on the final policy, I do think we should do a specific communication to parents, since we're missing the beginning of the year and getting it in the handbooks. Because this is, to some people, this is a significant change in operations within the schools, and I don't want to encourage parents to request the review of the video, but I do think that we don't want this to get lost.
Way to word it carefully,
Yeah.
because since it does relate to security,
Yep.
we don't want to have a discussion about where the cameras are and
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right.
But we can make reference certainly to a policy, and if an individual wanted to explore further with questions.
Yeah, certainly to make folks
Yeah.
just aware that, in the context of the fact that we have so many more cameras now, that we need to have some policy and procedure in place.
Right. Yeah. Okay, good points.
Okay. You think we'll be able to get a look at that before our next meeting?
I would think so. I'll make a request tomorrow of,
Okay.
It's the kind of thing we don't need to sit down with him.
Sure,
We need to send
exactly.
him the document and have him review it.
Yeah, really
So-
just if there's any concerns with how it's, letting him know it's based
Right.
on Norwell. Okay, so 8.2, looking at proposed school committee meeting dates for the coming school year.
So the recommended calendar is in there, very similar to past years. April and May are always difficult months for us because, of course, in April, we have town meeting, and so we have really only one working meeting to have things like program reviews. May is a challenge because we tried to reserve the first Monday in May, that if we were to have a school committee election and any new member, we need to have a time to have an orientation. And then we have the Memorial Day holiday in May as well, and so there's only one meeting. And so I scheduled 3 there for June, but this year we did not need to use the third one, and that could be the case. But that's the reason for the 3 there, because we have 2 months in a row where there would be only one meeting. You'll notice the schools where we would be intending to meet, and the September 22nd one is at the middle school. We have to think about where in the middle school that would be, and some of the discussion might be whether or not our cable setup is there. But of course, we don't have live cable capability in the other schools either, so I don't know that that's a big issue. But so that's the recommendation.
Are there any problem dates that jump out? Anybody? These are pretty consistent with what we've done historically. No? Okay.
And of course, it would be a separate schedule for the budget meetings as they come up in the
September
spring.
5th is our on-site, off-site.
15th.
14th.
I'm sorry, 14th.
Sunday, the 14th.
Sunday the 14th.
Pretty sure that's Sunday, the 14th.
It's here at
And we'll
8
post that
8
separately,
a.m., yeah.
but it will be posted.
Down in the bottom there.
Okay.
Okay, so I would accept a motion to approve this proposed calendar.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay. We have 3 homeschooling applications, which is typically the case at this time of year. You have those materials, at least to some extent, in your packets.
I do have some backup with me. In 2 of them, but in particular, there's some extensive documentation
Right.
there.
I know that at least 2 of these are repeat requests, 8.3 and 8.5. We should take them individually.
Yes.
So we could, why don't we just put a motion on the table, and then if there's discussion. So starting with the Breen children, 8.3.
I'll make a motion to approve the homeschooling application for Patricia Breen and Elizabeth Breen.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll make a motion to approve the homeschooling application for Owen McDougall.
Is there a second?
Second.
I just had a question on this, and just reading through it seemed like the plan was going to be kind of a Montessori type of instruction, and just from speaking to some parents over the years who have had their kids in Montessori school, and then some have found the adjustment to our elementary school a little bit challenging because of the different approach. And it seemed like the intention was to have this child continue in that homeschooling setting until 8th through 8th grade. And I was wondering if there are any concerns about that kind of transition into 9th grade after a Montessori kind of background.
I think it really depends upon the child and the quality of the program. And obviously, these are parents that are very, very interested in doing this. We used to get a lot of Montessori students as of grade 3, and that was a particularly hard transition, not an impossible one to make, and lots of children are very successful, but it is very different by the time we get to grade 3. Our children have had a much more structured, particularly reading and the literacy skills, much more structured instruction. So.
While you're on that, right, Dr. Gallo, I'm sure this people's plan is very detailed. I just had an observation on the hours, because like on day 1 and day 3, it's 6 hours in the morning. Now, granted, maybe that means till like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but I'm sure they're doing the work, but it just seemed like there was a...
We don't
like that-
have any discretion or guidelines in terms of the number of hours,
Okay.
or even whether it's every day or whatever, so that, if there are questions or concerns, I can ask the parent to come in, and we can talk about it more, but there isn't any prescribed number of hours that one has to do.
There
sure if that's one of the ones that we have.
I seconded.
Yeah. Any other questions, further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
And finally, I move that we approve the homeschooling application for, I'm sorry.
Eccles.
For William Eccles, Jonathan Eccles, and Sharice Eccles.
This, I'm assuming you have more backup for?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, extensive backup.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of backup for the Owen McDougal in this.
Right, and this is a repeat request, at least for two of the
Came in
children.
last spring.
Yes,
Right,
it
they
is.
moved it, that's right.
I'll second.
Any questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Okay. 8.6. So, the elephant in the room. The turf discussion. So as you know, I hope that perhaps, I know a number of you attended selectmen meeting, an advisory meeting, maybe some watched on television or the tape. But just to recap quickly for the folks at home, for many months, several citizens requested that that the school building committee pursue the installation of artificial turf as one of the playing fields in the middle school project, and I brought that to the attention of the rest of the school building committee and discussed it first in December, deciding to put off any further discussion of it until we were closer to the point where we were doing demolition and would know better what our situation with respect to contingency funds would be. We then had further discussion of that in June. A determination was made that we would hold a series of public meetings to gauge the either support or concerns, if any, of the public with the issue. And we certainly received a lot of correspondence, much in favor, a number of items from folks against the idea. Some raised concern about the process. I think we tried to address the process issue by having these public meetings, by allowing the selectmen and the advisory to weigh in on the issue, even though they really don't have a binding decision-making position on the issue. And certainly the school committee, as kind of the caretaker and custodian of the property, and the committee that will inherit the responsibility for it, whether it be grass or artificial turf in the future. And so certainly there have been differing opinions. Many questions have been raised with regard to the cost, with regard to the use of contingency funds, timing, concern about schedule, and as you may know, the selectmen considered the matter and voted, I would say, essentially 2-0 in favor of the school building committee pursuing turf at the middle school, with one selectman not voting no, but essentially saying he needed more information. And the advisory committee took 2 votes on the matter after hearing discussion and considering it. One vote was 10-2 in favor of recommending that the school building committee seek town meeting approval if they were going to install turf as part of the project. And the second one, a 10-1 with 1 abstention vote in favor of the school building committee pursuing a design and expending funds to develop a design and a more concrete cost estimate before proceeding. Those were essentially the votes that were taken, and this is the last of the meetings with the three boards, and the school building committee will take this issue up again on September 3rd and make a decision how to move forward. So that's kind of the brief synopsis of where we are. Certainly we have folks here in the audience. I know folks on the committee may have some feelings, but I thought maybe we'd open it up to folks in the audience first, without objection, and would certainly welcome anyone who had something to say on the matter to identify themselves and come up and talk to us. Sure. Would you come up, please? Name and address for the record.
My name is Ted Healy, 14 Harvest Lane, and I'm here representing Hingham Youth Soccer, and also I'm a board member of Hingham Sports Partnership. So I was involved with the high school project, and obviously I was the Ward Street project also. I got turned down. My observations in being part of these organizations, obviously the number of fields in town is just not enough, and obviously weather is our other factor. And before the middle school project was being built, for Hingham Youth Soccer, we had kickers and K1 playing there, and again, we fought water and schedules. And now currently we're at Notre Dame Academy. So Notre Dame Academy decides when we can play and not play there. And this past year, it has happened the last couple of years where they decide if they have an event or another sporting event, they tell us we can't use it that weekend, and then we have to tell parents we don't have a field. So on many occasions, I'd have to email out to parents that, we can't have a full schedule this season because Notre Dame has a track meet, Notre Dame has softball, because they use that field for some of their field events. So that became an issue. And obviously worked through it just like anything else. So our view, this is a must, and I don't see where you would not want to put an artificial turf field when you're dealing with the number of kids that we run on and off fields every weekend. And, I'm at our meeting last week with our board, and the discussion came up, and obviously I brought up the middle school project because one of the topics on our list is, well, we don't have enough fields, so we're going to rent some space down at the Classic Sports Center because it's not enough fields for our under 12 and under 14 kids to play. So it's like, and we've been doing this for several years, so we're going to do this again, and we'll have to continue doing that. Where that location is perfect for the size field that would be there, and for those age groups. Never mind, possibly moving some of those groups from Notre Dame Academy over back to the middle school where we used to play, whether it's on turf or on the extra grass section that's remaining. I mean, we use any little parcel of land that we can get. So that's our main group, which I have. And I'm sure the other sports coach flag football, and each one of these fields, all the fields were overused. I mean, you go down to Carlson, it's a beautiful complex, but these fields need a rest. And artificial turf, you can get away with no rest, because it's the same every time you come back. And if we can't leave those fields and get to another location and bring in new rooms and let those fields recover, they're just beat up and they can't handle the load that we put on with the multiple sports. I mean, Lynchfield's the same way with football. I mean, when you go out and try to play flag football, you're running through cavernous ditches. I mean, it's crazy. Never mind if there's water. And then you just wait for the one kid to end up in the puddle of mud. So that's our point of view. And as we did with the high school, and I talked with the board at the Hingham Youth Soccer, we would certainly be willing to help out. Because obviously we'd use it. I'm sure a lot of the other youth programs would be willing to help out too. I know we put money forward for the high school for some of the lining that was necessary for soccer, and we would certainly be willing to do that moving forward at the middle school. And this isn't just a need for kids that play the sports, but the programs, the after-school programs at the middle school. And I mean, it's going to be a joy for those kids to be able to use it, after school and weekends and summers. It's just a nice feature, and the high school's great, but again, it's mainly going to be used by the high school kids, and this middle school program is probably more geared towards the younger group of kids in town. So that was my pitch, but appreciate your time.
Rick, can I ask one question? Thanks, Ted. I guess my question to you is this. Like I've always said, I love turf. We've got a wonderful first year. I sort of agree with Paul Healy. He would put turf everywhere. I guess I'm confused on the timeline. Because right now, because turf was not even in our wildest imaginations when this school building project started. And so right now, if we do grass, a natural field, it's basically, I think you said fall of 16? 2 years to use?
Late. Grass would probably be, let's see, 1, 2, yeah.
Fall of 16.
2016 in any event.
So even if we went to town meeting and got approval, you could possibly have turf fall of 15. So I have no issue with the concept of turf, but why are the advisory said 10-2 on their straw poll, bring it to town meeting. 10-1, they said, use money to dot your I's, cross your T's. Do you support that? Or why would you not support advisory, bringing it to town meeting just so it's rubber stamped, when in theory, on a calendar basis, we're a year ahead, and then there'd be buy-in by everyone?
My opinion is it's getting passed around just so one person doesn't get stamped with making the decision, and I just think it's a decision that is easier than everyone's making it out to be. I think they're making it more of a political thing than that it's a need, and as soon as this topic came up, there were emails everywhere. I mean, it was a no-brainer at that point. It was a great idea, and just from the talk around town with the folks that we are in contact with, it was easy. I mean, yes, you could go to town meeting and have a vote, just like we've done before, but I think you'll have the same answer today as you will then. That's just my opinion. I mean, if I took a straw poll amongst the folks that use the fields and have kids in sporting programs, who are obviously going to use it the most, I think it's an easy answer. So that's why, delaying it down the road, I don't feel that's necessary, especially at the time when the middle school's almost complete. This would be the next logical move to complete the project, and complete it with a final grade stamp.
Can I just jump in here, Ted? So Andy, the way you posed that question was because the advisory committee voted the way they did, it's a fait accompli. There's no further discussion.
Well, so just
We're an independent board. And of course, that's why he's coming tonight, because he's trying to make his pitch to this board.
to him, why wouldn't he agree with that?
I mean, that's.
Yeah, and he just
their
responded.
opinion,
Right.
And that's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's going to have that. I just think the majority of the opinion is going to be on the positive side and the negative. Obviously, we have a small crowd.
But I mean, I take, when I listen to the advisory committee, I mean, I thought, they obviously, by their 10-1 vote on the straw poll, because they didn't have anything officially in front of them, my take, and I do like watching all this stuff on TV, it's easier than attending the meetings, is that my takeaway on that was, hey, this sounds like a good idea. Take money that we have and, come up with a formal plan. And then on their second thing was, they're not saying that it wasn't passed, but they said the process, which, Ray alluded to earlier, a process, whether we like it or not, that's the process we use in Hingham. We go to town meeting. And so I wasn't saying that advisory is that. I was asking them to respond because advisory came up with, it seemed like they were supporting the concept because they say use money, and then just came back to say go to town meeting.
Right, and if we had to go to town meeting to make that decision, then that would be obviously the next step. But if we don't have to go to town meeting, is that something that is necessary?
No, because I also start thinking there about the timeline. Even if you go to town meeting, you're still ahead. Because, as we said, we were always talking grass, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Turf fields, the Hingham High School project wasn't even, in conception. So that's why I'm just sort of, you're going with support, which I appreciate. I'm just sort of curious, why is a happy compromise, why wouldn't you support, going to town meeting?
So I would like to just say, Ray, that I think it'd be beneficial if we had a discussion first. I assume a lot of these people have been to the other meetings as well. I think it might be beneficial for us to discuss as a school committee what our concerns are, our opinions are, and whatever, and then people could ask us or respond to that. Yeah.
So at the advisory committee,
Yeah.
it was a very in-depth conversation with the advisory committee members, and it was so late by the time they finished their conversation that there were people in the audience that actually were cut off from speaking. So I think what we're trying to do tonight is, the whole purpose of this meeting is to get public input. I think we should be hearing from the public first.
Yeah.
So I'm done with my questions.
Carol?
I just want to make one short comment. I think we're here to hear what they have to say,
Right.
and then we can state ours. I don't think we need to interrogate anybody.
Right, no, absolutely.
So
And
I
just-
think they should get up, state their fact, and then sit down and we'll listen.
Exactly.
Okay.
No, that's a good point. And just real quickly, because then we'll go with folks, because you posed it to him, and I don't know if he's really best suited to answer it exactly. With respect to the schedule, just to be clear, so you said, even if we were to go to town meeting, we would be a year ahead of when we expected to be able to use the fields. Perhaps, but if the school building committee were to decide to pursue turf and to wait for a town meeting vote in order to do so, if that were in April of next year, that would be 8 months from now, and that would alter the schedule of the rest of the site work while we wait. And, I'm sure Tim Collins will get up and he'll tell you that we would need to have the contractor do something to protect the site while it sits and waits. Or would we do something and spend money on something only to have it ripped up? I don't know the answer to that. So, that's another concern. Another concern, and real quickly, and then we'll go to the audience again, happened to be at the middle school today for a great event. Happened to talk to the principal, Derek Smith. And, he mentioned to me that if there was a way to get a field that was usable, at least by the end of this school year, or at least for a part of this school year, that would be tremendous. And I was reminded that there are kids that are going through this middle school that have been without fields for over 2 years and have had just a little tiny patch of grass to use. And there will be some kids who go through the whole 3 years there without really any fields to use. So, to some folks' mind, I think, the sooner something can be done, whether it's grass or turf, the better. And if you take one path that somehow delays the other, that's a concern that some have voiced to me, but.
And remember, I got my dates from you from last meeting, so that's where I'm referencing my dates.
Sure.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, Ted.
Yeah, thank you. Audience members, yes.
Good evening, I'm Mike Brazes from, I live at 83 Lozelle Street, Hingham. I guess I have a question first. So if it were to go to town meeting, does this fall in the category of it needs a majority or a 3/4, or is that
Right. So,
TBD?
sure. So typically, the 2/3 vote is required when there's borrowing, an appropriation that involves borrowing. The appropriation for this project has already been made, and it did earn a 2/3 vote previously, so it would be a simple majority vote. Depending on how the article, if there were an article drafted, but I'm presuming that it would be a simple majority because there would be no funding necessary because the funding already exists.
So I think there might be some nervousness from the community that might be pro for it, that in past experiences, a 3/4 majority vote is very difficult to attain. So that might be some of that scariness on that part. I think it's great that people aren't just jumping into either way of this. So it's great to make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's. It's fantastic, and I applaud everybody to be conservative to the point of making good decisions. But I guess the way I personally look at it is that if you were building a house, so the field has to be built. That's the fact that we all know. So if you're building a house and I have to build a deck because there's an existing deck, I could do wood or I could do some sort of artificial wood. So the wood's going to last me 20 years and the artificial wood's going to last me 50 years. And the cost, when you add it all up of standing the deck and all that, I look at it that way and saying, we already have to build a field. The usage is going to be there. So all the youth sports and also the school itself. Take out the youth sports, take out any of the peripheral athletics. The school itself, if you look at the usage, and you guys, I'm preaching to the choir literally here on the usage of fields at schools. I think it just makes sense that as long as we do it the right way, I know there's nervousness about process, but it just makes sense, I think, to do it now. At some point, somebody's going to be standing up here talking to another committee about we need a turf field. It's not going to go away. It's a process. If you go to Lincoln Sudbury, there's 6 fields. So I'm not trying to compare towns, but it's going to come back. So it just seems like a good opportunity. So whether or not it needs to go to committee, I just feel like it's not a no-brainer, but it just makes sense. So that's it.
Christine Falvey, 12 Isaacsbury Drive. Also president of Hingham Sports Partnership, although I'm not speaking formally on behalf of Hingham Sports Partnership, as we've not had a board meeting this summer and had an official vote on this topic. However, the board seems very supportive of all of this. First and foremost, I got the chance to be at the middle school today, and wow. I mean, really, it took my breath away. It's beautiful, and all of you, prior school committees, the school building committee, the administration, our entire town should be so pleased with that school. It really, I mean, I was so proud to be there. It's beautiful. And there's only one thing that we need to do to wrap it all up, and that is to put a turf field at that school. And I know I've attended all the meetings, and I've listened to everyone. And there's a part of me that understands the part about the process, because I am a process person. But in this case, I'm going to urge the school committee to think about this. And I wish I had said this to the advisory committee meeting at the meeting last week. We've learned so much since 2011 as a town. In 2011, when we voted on that school, first of all, we only voted on a school. We didn't vote on the athletic fields of that school. It was simply the school. But I suspect, even if we had voted on the fields, we wouldn't have made, we wouldn't have known how to make the right decision because we didn't have the experience or the first-hand knowledge that we have today. 3 years has gone by since that vote. And in those 3 years, this town has studied turf extensively. We did it in preparation for that high school field complex. We looked at the pros and the cons. We looked at the financial analysis. We looked at the usage. And as a town, we learned a lot. And we had an overwhelmingly supportive vote by this town to put in a turf at that high school. 80% of the vote that night supported a turf field. So I think the thing that, an elected board like the school committee or an appointed board like the advisory committee needs to understand is people trust you guys. You get elected and appointed because you're smart people. And we know you're going to make a prudent and smart decision for our town. And I don't think that people need to be so afraid. I view it as people not wanting to stand up and make a hard decision here and wanting to go back to town meeting to let town meeting make the decision because honestly, it feels like that's a little bit easier to do than to make the decision. And I believe if everyone just took a step back and really thought about everything we learned over the last 3 years in preparing for that high school field and looked at the financial impact over a long term, we know turf is a better decision for our town. We know usage is better for our town with the turf field. That is the prudent decision. And as a board of representatives of this town, you can't just say, oh, but in 2011 we didn't include turf and now we can't do it. You have to use your experiences and your knowledge that you've gained over the last 3 years. and make the prudent and right decision for our town. I mean, I've been to all these meetings, guys. No one is showing up to these meetings. It's the same cast of 4 or 5 people. People aren't going to get engaged. They want the board to make the decision, because that's why you're elected and that's why you're appointed. Thank you.
Cynthia.
Street, and yes, it is the same people, unfortunately, but I think it's also summertime. I am a process person, or I'm happy to process, and I do not think it's a no-brainer. I think there are 7 members of the school building committee for whom this is a very difficult decision. I would not want to be in their shoes and have to make this decision knowing that I don't know what everyone else thinks. And what we do in Hingham is we let the town decide. That's how we do business. And I think that it's not a very gracious way to say thank you for all of the hard work that the school building committee has done for the last 9 years, some 8 years, to put this decision on them and possibly have this be the last thing that's remembered in their tenure. And it could go very wrong. I would argue, I would agree with Chris that we need to look back at the past, but maybe back to 2009. And when another committee decision was made by the school committee that wasn't popular and that resulted in a special town meeting. So I would suggest that the safest thing to do is take it to town meeting, let the town decide. Either way, you're spending money on design, you're spending money on some seed, to save, keep the field going, and you're going to be spending money either way. Let the town decide.
Bill.
Hello, Bill Crean, 10 at Walker Court. I parent of 3 children, my oldest, which is going to enter middle school shortly, so grateful for that asset for the town. And I think one of the things that has made Hingham prosper is we've invested in our community, and I think we've seen the results of that and how the town has thrived. And I also appreciate that we've had a lot of volunteers and elected officials that have made decisions, but a lot of the topics have been discussed. I serve on the ad hoc committee for the school committee for the Fields project, and we've talked about all the reasons why financially it makes sense and operationally it makes sense. And I think part of what leaders need to do is they need to, we know in Hingham people look at the finances very carefully, and I think we've been through these. There's been a lot of studies done, but grass is absolutely not the best decision for the middle school. And my concern is that regardless of what happens, whether it's town meeting or that if it ends up that just is the default, I think that would be a big mistake for a lot of the reasons why we talked tonight. So again, I don't know what you're going to vote on tonight, but I would hope you would take the lead of the selectmen who voted to move forward. We talk about the advisory committee, the selectmen, they're elected, very high profile, and they took that position. So if I were to make a recommendation, I would hope that you would follow their lead, and then also vote at the discretion of the building committee. If they could give them your approval or your recommendation, they don't need your approval. And again, we also know that they have the legal authority to do this. And even if we go grass, we're going to need irrigation, we're going to need a well. I've heard the number $100,000 thrown out. I mean, there's already been money that's been spent. They have the authority to do that. We provide them the flexibility to do that. And I know it's a larger number than some people may be comfortable with, but I just echoing what people have said, we've already demonstrated the reasons why. So the second thing I would recommend is that similar to what the ad hoc committee did, that the school committee would recommend, if they so choose, to spend money to design and get better pricing, because there's been a lot of people that have been concerned about that. So I don't know what you're going to vote on, but I think those would both be positive things. And again, there's a building committee coming up, and I'm sure I'll be at that one if I can. And I hope we just don't go to the default of it's just easier to do it and move on. And I've heard other people say it, and I'll say it, that, you know, I think it'll be a mistake if we don't have turf there, but I don't think, you know, I'm certainly not going to be one that's going to say that makes or breaks this project. It's going to be a great school no matter what happens, and I applaud the building committee for, you know, people talk about process. This is process. Granted, hopefully people are watching on TV, but the appointed committees and the elected committees have all met and had discussions on this. This is process. So we can disagree as to whether it's the right process, but they're not making a decision in the vacuum. And again, let's not lose sight. The AdCom took a position, but the selectmen also took a position, and I hope you follow in their lead. And congratulations, it's a great project, and you know, thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else? Okay. I'll open it up to the committee. Anyone want to start? Any questions? Any feelings?
Okay, so I actually have not been able to attend either the Selectmen's meeting or the Advisory Committee meeting, although I have seen parts of it on television. So after the building committee, I think it was the building committee meeting I went to, where the presentation you guys made, so a month ago, I put together an email that I sent about some questions I had. And at the time, I said, some of you may or may not know that I served for 6 years on advisory before I came on the school committee. So I said, you know, if I had my advisory hat on, I'd be looking at this one way. But I'm not on the advisory committee anymore, and I don't think that's our responsibility. I will say parenthetically that I have a concern that the town hasn't looked at what our real needs are at the fields and where the best place to put the fields are and the best place to invest in fields and so forth. But I don't think that's our job tonight. I think that, so the questions that I had from the school perspective is, where's the best place to have a turf field for the school department? You know, some of you may know that when we looked at the high school field project, we seriously considered putting in the drainage and so forth to potentially put a second turf field over by the parking lot. So we thought, we knew that there was a need for additional playing fields, additional time in the town. I don't know if that's a better place or not a better place. I have heard that, and I read Margaret's letter, Margaret Connolly, about the advantages to doing something at the middle school. So I'll make those questions, which is, so what would, if the school committee has this money to spend, and I understand this money is for the middle school project only, but ultimately the town's going to borrow the money whether we spend it for the middle school or whether we spend it for a field somewhere else. It may be more expensive to put a field somewhere else. So, but I have to look at, because in my for-profit life, I do strategic planning. So I think, where's the best place to put this field for the school department? Ultimately, I think somebody ought to be looking where's the best place to put it for the town. And just my last comment would be, Mr. Grazis, I thought you said, I made a very interesting point to me, and that was, when we went through the whole high school field project, we came to the conclusion that turf fields and natural and synthetic turf fields were about a wash, cost-wise. So from the building committee's perspective, if that's the case, and if we really believe it's about a wash cost-wise, and we think we would get substantially more utility from a turf field, synthetic turf field, I think you could make a strong argument that the right thing to do at the middle school is to put a synthetic turf field there, if it's going to provide better utility at the same cost. But again, I would like to talk about, does it offer us a better program at the middle school from the school committee's perspective? does it benefit programs within the schools outside the middle school? Would we have, does it make sense to have high school teams coming over to the middle school to practice, or I don't know if they could play games there, that kind of thing. And in the big picture, if we decided, yeah, there's a need for additional synthetic turf fields to serve the school committee's purposes, is that the best place to put it? So I don't know who, Ray was aware, I don't know what additional information we've gotten on that, but those would be my concerns.
I mean, the first thing I said, and you alluded to it, is that the money for the middle school project is locked in for the middle school project. So it's not like we can use, leftover contingency or below appropriation funds to put a field in at Carlson or Lynch or a second field at the high school or anywhere else. So that's not, I don't even see the value of discussing that. Whether, the town should be looking at installing, or the school department should be looking at installing additional artificial turf fields elsewhere in town is for either this or a future committee to consider at another time with some other funding source. I don't know what that would be and when that might be.
Well, so the only thing, just very briefly, the way I see it is, since this is not a reimbursable item, it would not be, whether we spend $800,000 at the middle school, where the town borrows $800,000 to do it at the middle school, or the town says, we're not going to use that money that's already been appropriated, and we go to town meeting and say, we're going to borrow $800,000, $1 million, or $1.5 million to put it at the high school, or Lynch Fields, or Carlson Fields. To me, that is a wash, in my head. I'm not saying everybody agrees with that, but the town's going to borrow the money whether it's at the middle school or not. It's already been appropriated, true, but if the town believes it's a good idea to put it either there or somewhere else, that's not, again, to me, that's not a persuasive argument. It may be to others.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. That's decent logic. I don't know that, that's the only factor involved. I mean, certainly here there's concerns about schedule, timing, and, I don't think you can dismiss the utility of a turf field at the middle school level, and not just, because maybe high school teams could use it as a second game field or practice field, that youth sports could certainly use it, but that physical education classes could certainly use it and could use it when the weather is bad. Margaret made a point about, kids walking around with wet shoes all day. Well, that happens. Otherwise, they don't go outside. And with a turf field, that wouldn't be the case. I think it just certainly gives you more opportunity, and certainly with an eye at expanding intramural activities at the middle school, it provides a greater opportunity for that expansion.
It also provides parking. I mean, Margaret, when she was speaking before the advisory committee, she talked about the fact that there's substantial parking there, that if you placed it someplace else, for instance, if you were to put it back at the high school, which I don't see us actually ever reopening that, but, that would be an additional strain on parking there, so you already have a situation at the middle school where there would be sufficient parking, so.
And Dennis, too, when we were looking at putting that second field in over there, we didn't have the expanded parking lot that we have now. So, I just don't think it would ever fit down at the high school.
I thought it was designed to fit with the new parking lot.
Well, there were wetlands concerns. We would have to go, the Conservation Commission, it became clear that it would be difficult to get through conservation with that.
Dennis, you did the 30-year, you did the spreadsheet with the analysis of pushing the field out 30 years, and when we did that analysis, economically, it was a wash. But now, with everything we've gone through with Aquarian this summer, if we ever planted a field and then didn't water it or couldn't water it, it's going to fail. And I can't imagine the cost of replanting. And if we have several summers like this in a row, you've got to add that into the economic analysis also when you're considering something like this, I would think.
Share a piece of information that not everyone may be aware of. So, School Building Committee met on the 13th, and,
2 or 3 days ago.
2 or 3 days ago. And, 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 2 or 3 days a because the topic of irrigation had come up, and there was some concern that if we continued with the design, that there would not be an irrigation. And originally, it was very briefly intended, and then it was quickly taken out. The committee actually approved authorizing our engineer and architect to move forward with engineering and design work on an irrigation system and a well, installation of a well, including a test well, and we authorized up to $40,000. And we thought, under the circumstances, and I think I even made the assumption that we would move forward as designed with grass. And if we were going to move forward as designed with grass, that it seems clear that we would need irrigation, particularly in light of what's gone on with Aquarian recently. And because there is money available to do that, the rest of the committee in attendance agreed with that. And so we did authorize that. And we thought the timing was important, because if we make the assumption that we're going to continue with grass as designed, the contractor is ready to start grading that area to prepare fields the first week of September. And we didn't want to lose any time waiting till our meeting on September 3rd before making a decision. Turf, grass, okay, if it's grass, then we have to look at irrigation, and then we've wasted 4 weeks. So we felt it prudent to go ahead and authorize that work, so that when we make a decision on September 3rd, if it is grass, we can move forward immediately with an irrigation system.
So we have not even a ballpark number as if what irrigation might cost?
I'm not sure exactly. I think, certainly the design and engineering is part of it. I think we were told it would be somewhere between 25 and 35. We authorized up to 40. I think with installation, including the well, it might approach 100,000. I'm not sure, though.
I would like to add to that. I fully support that decision about an irrigation system and the well. I feel that it's a problem at East now, not just for the youth sports, but my primary concern is for the students. And it was a different time, economically, experience-wise, that we couldn't put that irrigation system in there. But we should look at, if we can retrofit things in the long run, considering that at East too. And I think it's very prudent that we do put that in, and apparently from the power presentation, we need the water for a turf field if we go that way. I would also request that the school building committee consider a metal detector for the earth once the demolition is removed, and whatever high level of sifting through that ground that we can do, because at East there was rebar that migrated up from the ground, from the demolition, and through into the field. Now, no matter what type of surface we go with, that will be a problem if that migrates up. So if you can talk to the contractor about, and I had a conversation with John about this a couple weeks ago, that I think that would be money well spent. It's a much bigger demolition than even East wasn't exactly on top of the fields. The old building wasn't, and this one is. And for safety purposes for everyone, I don't know what they can do, but something should really be considered for that as well.
Ray, if the school building committee on the 3rd were to vote in favor of proceeding with the idea of installing a synthetic turf field, what would that cast a status on your well exploration?
I don't know. I mean, I presume that we would put that on hold. I'm not sure. The way I see it, and there are really 3 options for the school building committee. One is to do nothing and to proceed with grass as designed. And if that's the case, then we've already taken the first step forward with respect to irrigation and a well. The second thing is to proceed under the authority granted by town meeting in 2006 and special town meeting in 2011, and if the committee saw fit to move forward and pursue turf. And the third is to authorize spending money on a design and a cost estimate, and then seeking future town meeting approval. I think those are the three options, basically, that I see before us at the building committee.
So Ray, since I think, again, from the school committee's perspective, our job is to do what's the best for the schools, even though obviously there's going to be a lot of advantage to the community from putting in, I think everybody agrees, there's a significant advantage to the community from putting in a synthetic turf field. I'd be interested to hear, and Carol on the end, Falvey, made a comment about the financial, but again, I would be interested to think if, in fact, we believe, I don't know, might be interesting to hear Tim Collins comment on it from his perspective, or even somebody from advisory, but if we believe that, in fact, as an investment, a synthetic turf field is a superior investment to putting in a grass field, because of the less maintenance and so forth, and that in the long run, 15 years, as Carol mentioned, we went up 30 years to the high school, it turned out to be about a wash, no pun intended. That I think you could make the argument from the school committee's perspective that I think if the cost is the same, I don't think I would say I'd rather have a natural turf field there, or natural grass field there, as opposed to a synthetic turf field there. So I'd be curious to hear others on the school committee, see if they find that persuasive or not.
Oh, go ahead.
I agree with you, Dennis. I mean, I think economically it makes sense. I think the location makes sense to me. It's at a school. We already have parking. I will support the school building committee in whatever they decide, but I would urge them to consider turf, and if they don't consider turf this first time out, I urge them to consider budgeting and designing for, and bringing to town meeting a full-fledged design for turf up at the middle school. I think based upon the experience that we had at the high school, that we've learned we have a need for turf, we have a need for fields, we need to rest fields, and economically, given the current water situation and everything else, makes sense.
I have different concerns. First, Tim's the only one from the school building committee here, and I'd like to thank you for your service. But I'm looking at, sorry.
It's okay.
See you in other contexts. I look at this as my priority to the students and the staff and the town to provide the best education possible and be accountable for the taxpayers' money. My primary concern of this project is the timing of the proposal. If a decision needs to be made by September 3rd, and we don't have real design costs, board approvals, cost estimates to work with, and if we do decide, or if the school building committee decides to move forward, then the school department staff would have to be intimately involved in a very rigorous and time-consuming process when they're already dealing with significant number of management priorities. We have to open the new school. More than 1,000 students and hundreds of staff will be moving into a brand-new school that is still part of an active work zone. The bus loop, parking areas, and fields are still under construction. As I know from my experience with the opening of East School, it is wonderful to have a new building, but there is always a period of adjustment. Once the building is full of people, there are bound to be issues that arise and need to be dealt with. For example, the East School playground and car loop plan had to be changed from initial concepts based on actual use. Second priority, the one-to-one curriculum. The opening of the new middle school will launch Hingham's one-to-one technology curriculum, beginning a dramatic, exciting change to Hingham's secondary education program. This program provides every student in the 6th grade with a Chromebook technology device to use in school and at home. The teachers have already received their devices and are preparing their curriculum. The school administration is currently finalizing policies and procedures for this program. This educational initiative is a major priority that represents a new mode of teaching and learning, and as such requires much of the administration's and the middle school staff focus. Third, personnel contracts. School departments negotiating to finalize personnel contracts with all 6 bargaining units. Full-day kindergarten. The school committee has requested that the administration revisit the 2008 evaluation of full-day kindergarten in Hingham, and it has become an important curriculum issue. Parents of younger children have been requesting full-day kindergarten for many years, and we are due to receive a report in September and then have to review accordingly. State mandates. We continue to be inundated with state mandates. The high school fields. We have the dedication ceremony planned for September 20th, but this project still is not complete. The caps haven't been taken off the drainage pipe, so we're not completely sure if the drainage is working. The school committee is still evaluating the fees charged to the youth sports leagues to determine whether or not they will cover all the costs for maintaining and using the multi-purpose field. And as we discussed at our July 21st meeting, there's still much to understand about the maintenance, usage, and costs associated with this facility. The new school year. Fall is always a busy time in the school department. And central office staff. Due to recent retirements and resignations and leaves, we have a staff shortage in the budget office, and the situation is being managed, but it's still a burden on you to add another project. Fulfilling all of these above priorities and goals will have a lasting impact on the future of Hingham's educational system for all students, and I do not want the school department or school committee to be distracted from these important responsibilities to the students, staff, and town. An artificial turf field is not a priority for the middle school. It is a priority for a select number of youth sports programs. The process of installing a turf field at the middle school would require a great deal of time and attention over the next few months, and I feel we need to focus on our long-established priorities and not be distracted from our real responsibilities. In addition to this, I feel like Dennis does, that, how do we know, do we really need another turf field? Does the second field have to be on a school property, or could it be on a recreation department property or another property in town? We mentioned Lynch, we mentioned second field at the high school. What other public recreation facilities do we want or do we need? As Dennis mentioned with the money at town meeting, it is the town's money, and how do we prioritize how we spend the town's money? I don't know the answers to these questions, but I would be glad to consider them if we had concrete data and time to investigate all the options. I feel, I've said this before, the town should establish a town-wide recreation facility master plan review committee rather than leaving this decision just to the school building committee, who is restricted to recommendations only for the middle school property. A town-wide committee can assess all current fields, recommend money to spend money to fix all of the fields if necessary, review all the facts, determine ownership. Schools, school building committee, recreation, selectmen, DPW, country club can all be involved to vet these recommendations. With this proposal, there's still so many open variables to it. Time is a concern. What happens if the Conservation Commission or the Planning Board doesn't approve the plan? What if town meeting doesn't approve the plan? I hope we can just go ahead with the grass field. What about the costs? What if the costs are higher than the contingency budget remaining? Are the people asking for this field willing to contribute to cover any overage? Hingham Youth Soccer, thank you for offering to contribute tonight. You're the first that I've heard making that offer. How will the replacement carpet be paid for in 10 to 15 years? When the school committee proposed usage fees to cover the costs for the high school turf field, the youth sports group said no, those fees are too high. The school committee is currently evaluating a revised fee structure, whether these costs will be covered or not. Now these same people who are advocating putting in a second turf field and said no until tonight, in the first one, on offering supplemental monetary support for the infrastructure or usage fees of a second turf field. In 10 to 15 years, when carpets would have to be replaced for 2 fields, if we add a second one now, how will the town and the school department allocate over approximately $800,000 to replace those carpets? The school committee has other key long-term capital priorities, such as the Foster School shed and windows at Foster and Plymouth River. By that point, the high school south and east will be due for significant repairs, and technology will likely play a larger role in learning and will be an ever-changing capital commitment. I'm sure there is a solution to paying for these carpet replacements, and with more time, we can address that issue. So to me, that's a key monetary issue, that it's not just installing the field right now, but what's over the long run, where are we going to come up with that money? I'm going to skip over that. So when I also looked at the turf field design proposals that PAR prepared, personally, I looked at all of them and I prefer grass for the middle school for a couple reasons. I feel that the middle school should have a baseball and softball field, and to me, option 1 is the only one that provides this within the approved site plan. However, this is the most expensive option, and costs are completely unknown, so this is the highest risk of exceeding the available contingency budget. This option also creates a massive turf area, the full size of the old building, with minimal grass on the farthest part of the property from the building. The turf field will be what one sees when entering the middle school property. And I must say the song Big Yellow Taxi from Joni Mitchell or Counting Crows, they paved paradise and put in a parking lot, comes into my head. I would also assume it'll be fenced in due to the same security concerns at the high school field. If this is the case, almost the entire property would be buildings, parking lots, and turf. A complete grass area, on the other hand, would deliver a more appealing entry to the school property and a true multi-purpose field which can be adapted to any activity for the middle school program. As we've heard, they do golf and archery and other activities. Usage for the middle school students is limited. They don't have recess, which contributes to additional wear and tear in the elementary schools, such as East School. Yeah, intramural programs could be started, but they haven't had them in a couple years, and we don't know where that would be going. On the other hand, grass would provide a new grass baseball and softball field that could be used by Hingham Youth Baseball and Softball, and Hingham Youth Lacrosse and Hingham Soccer could still use the grass multipurpose field. And there certainly are environmental benefits to having natural space with plants and grass. And my other concern is we've known about the restrictions, time restraints on these fields, and I don't feel like people have worried about them too much until now when this opportunity was presented. And I would say, if a town-wide facility master plan recommended this site, then I would be willing to put the field in there. So we have a fantastic new middle school. Many of us saw it today, and it's opening in less than 2 weeks. And my priority, and I think our priority, must remain the new school and the students' needs. They deserve our undivided attention, and not us rushing through a sports construction project that has many significant unknown variables. So, thank you.
Wow, that was a lot. I think if this were town meeting, you would have been gavelled out about a minute and a half ago. Some very interesting points. Just 2 quick things, because we do have press in the room and we're on television. I want to be very clear about the things that we say and make sure that we're accurate. The drainage at the high school is working, regardless of whether the catch basins are still partially covered or not. The drainage is working at the high school, and I don't want anyone to think otherwise. Certainly there are punch list items that are still being worked on, and that project is not yet complete, but it's very close.
In the spring, around the softball
Right.
scoreboard, it didn't appear to be, so that's
It's now
my
August
concern.
and the grass is grown in yet.
Yep.
So the drainage is working.
Okay.
The second thing I just wanted to say is, so you mentioned a concern about time that this project would take away from, take the administration and, in fact, the school committee. So first, I don't want to think about this concept as a project, right? This is an idea to pursue an added feature to the existing middle school project. This is not a separate project. It would not be a separate project. If it were pursued, it would be pursued as part of the existing middle school project. That middle school project is being handled by the school building committee. And in fact, over the last 3 years, I have given updates to this committee, but beyond that, this committee has not really been involved in the project. It has not had to spend really any time on that at all. Certainly, the administration is involved in the project. However, we have a professional staff that is overseeing the middle school project, the project manager, an architect, contractor, and engineers. And they are the ones that are charged with this. And if artificial turf were to be pursued, it would be handled by, presumably, our project professionals in place. There may or may not be a new contractor. That remains to be seen. But there would be no additional burden on the administration or the school committee at all. It would be part of the existing middle school project. It may prolong completing the middle school project, but that would be done by the paid professionals and not by the administration. Certainly there would be continued involvement by the administration, but that would be no different than under the current circumstances. So I just wanted to make that clear. So let's not think that the proposal or the suggestion would put any undue burden on the administration. That's just not the case.
Well, my concern is that, as of right now, the project's winding down, and we're in the final stages. If we go through this, we have to review with town boards again, we have to bid out things again, and John is involved, and John is got a full plate right now. And
yeah, John doesn't handle the bidding and things like that. The school building committee has paid professionals who do all of that for that project. He certainly is involved, but he would still be involved, and I would just say that we are in we're beyond the construction phase for the school. We are in phase 2B, I believe, of the project with respect to site work, and I believe the committee currently feels that we'll be working on this at least through the spring and probably, well into late next year or beyond while the MSBA closes out its audit and things of that nature. I think the final report from the project manager from the East project was done in the end of 2010, and the final audit was done around then or thereafter, because when I came on the school building committee in March or April of 2011, they had just finished really talking about East, and there were little extraneous things here and there. So there will be some continued involvement for the school building committee. I don't believe that there would be any additional burden by the administration if the decision to pursue turf. It's a fair point, but I just want to make sure that we're clear on the facts. You raised all of those things that we're talking about, whether it's full-day kindergarten, it's the one-to-one initiative, the contracts that we're negotiating. These are all things that are taking up our time, the school committee's time, the administration's time, but they're separate and apart and have nothing to do with the school building committee and its work on the middle school project.
I must say that I'm pretty sanguine about the fact that whether we do a grass field or a synthetic turf field, that's going to be handled by the full-time OPM, owner's project manager, and the architect and the contractor and whatever. And again, if John feels that he thinks it would be a burden, or anybody else thinks it'd be a burden, I think it's a worthwhile concern to have and to address. But to me, the financial aspect of it, I fully came in here, by the way, expecting to support going to town meeting about this, and I haven't decided 100% which way when we ultimately make a decision about it. But I am persuaded, or I find it persuasive, I'm not persuaded yet, but I find it persuasive that, again, if, and we have pushed the numbers, that it's not any more expensive, and you're absolutely right, Liza, that, we are going to need to replace the carpet. It won't be 800, well, I don't know what it'll be in 15 years, it's tough to say, but.
We have two
but it's about
around the same time. That's my concern, that, within a year or two of each other.
The analysis Dennis did included the replacement.
You know what I'm saying? So the replacement carpet included in the middle school, and as obviously at the high school, we looked at that in terms of, a full life cycle cost. But it is a concern, 15 years from now, when somebody says, hey, it's $500,000 to replace that carpet, and we say, but yeah, we know that, but we saved $20,000 a year, whatever the number is, and somebody could well say, well, yeah, we saved $20,000 a year in the school operating budget, or the DPW budget or whatever, but we didn't save it in capital. So, I mean, it's a legitimate concern, which, is hard for us to address. Again, I come back to the fact that, if the school committee feels that it's no more costly for the town to put in a synthetic field there versus a natural field, and we get as much or more utility for the school program, then it seems to me, it's worth considering. The concerns you have about grass for whether it's a baseball or softball field or whatever, I would have to punt that one over to Margaret or somebody that at the middle school that's responsible for those kinds of things. I don't know how that affects the school program. It may well affect the community usage and what that is. But again, I think from our perspective, our job is to do what's best for the school program. Margaret, at least initially in her letter, and I guess in testimony since then, has suggested she thinks it's a good idea. And I think she considered the whole program.
And Dennis, to that.
But I don't know that.
To me, Margaret Conity, she knows a lot about turf fields. I appreciate that and all her expertise. But my concern is for the middle school students. And what is the middle school student physical education curriculum, and what does the middle school staff want for their school? That should be the first priority. And I haven't heard, until you mentioned tonight, about Derek saying, well, let's have something as soon as possible, which I'm sure anybody would say. But I haven't heard, and I've asked, what really is their program, and what do they want? What do the physical education teachers in the middle school want for their curriculum? And that, to me, should be the first priority. And then, after that, their facility, yes, let's share it with the town. But I don't want Hingham Youth Lacrosse, Hingham Youth Soccer to dictate what we're providing for our students, because, and no offense to any of you, you run great programs, and but not every child participates in those programs. But most children in Hingham will go through the middle school, and they have to participate in physical education. It's part of the state curriculum.
So Carol wants to say something, but just real quick. So we're a district-wide curriculum town. Not all towns are like that. So we have curriculum K through 12 that are handled by district directors. So the curriculum at the middle school for physical education is set. We're just talking about the surface on which they'll execute it. But Carol wanted to speak.
All right. So I don't know if you gentlemen are going to be speaking up tonight, but I'll jump in ahead of you.
It's always good to have back and forth.
We're back and forth. So at the Board of Selectmen meeting, I mean, the reason these meetings were set up for the summertime was to get some community input. And I think it was to provide some process as well. The Board of Selectmen meeting, I think the issue that resonated with me at that meeting was the fact that we didn't have a specific cost, we didn't have a specific plan. And, I think as that meeting ended and we went into advisory committee, there seemed to be overwhelming consensus and support for the building committee to go forward in developing that plan, to spend the money to develop it, and come up with a cost estimate. And I would totally support them making that decision. Going forward, assuming that they actually do that, and that the price comes in at about what we think it will come in at, we've built a field, so we know it's probably $750,000 to $800,000. In looking at a recommendation, these are the factors that I'm looking at. I'm kind of with Dennis. I am looking at the economics, but before I even get to the economics, I'm looking at the purview, and I know there's been a lot of conversation about, does the building committee have the authority to do this? And to distinguish it from the special town meeting that Cynthia brought up tonight, we've had 3 different attorneys in 3 different practice areas, all that touch on this, say that it is within the purview of the building committee. We've had the town council, we've had our building attorney, and we've had our bond attorney who's looking at our finances. To me, that is very persuasive to me, that I've got 3 different practice areas coming in and telling me the same thing. So, do I think that they have the authority to do that? Absolutely. Is it distinguishable from 2009? Probably, because I don't think we had so many legal counsel weighing in on that subject. I then get beyond that, they have the authority to do it. I'm now looking at the finances. Does it make sense financially? Yep, it does. We don't need to belabor that point. Turf versus grass over the life. The cost for an average taxpayer, $7 a year. I think that makes financial sense. And the money's allocated. We don't have to go looking for it, or it's already going to be borrowed. That, to me, is very persuasive. Now, my next question is it a good investment for this community? I have to say yes. We have a demonstrated need for fields. We have a shortage, and this field could be available next summer. Liza, I hate to have to disagree with you, but I would hardly say that the 80% vote that voted for a turf field at town meeting is a select number of youth programs. It's just not. It's a huge percentage, and I think Ted, or maybe Mr. Brazos brought it up at town meeting. That's an overwhelming amount of people that supported the project. And I have to believe, let me have my time to speak, please, that that same support would be evident here. Is it a good location? Yes. Margaret spoke at length about this. There's 1,000 kids going to school there. There is substantial parking. Is it the best location in the town? I can't answer that question, but it's a really good location. It's a hub of the community. I've come up with many yeses, and so I go back to, the purpose of the meetings was to provide input. So we have some input. I believe that, it's so funny because I wrote my notes earlier today, and we got this letter when we arrived tonight, and this woman who it was wonderful, sort of echoed what I was saying, and I'm going to read part of what she said. I believe residents do rely on us, the elected people and the appointed people, to make good decisions. And I think it's probably okay with them that we go forward. So I'm going to read from this woman's letter. The big picture.
That was me.
Oh.
I sped all the way back to Kennedy Lake Park.
Are you Lisa?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, do you mind?
Please do.
The big picture. The majority of leaders think we need a town meeting for voters to choose on what kind of a surface little Johnny is going to kick a soccer ball. In my mind, this is a non-issue. Just because it wasn't the original plan doesn't make it wrong to change, as some might argue, because it wasn't in writing. I know as well as every other person who has been involved in a construction project that building is a process, and unforeseen variables change our outcomes, and creative solutions are applied. Please use your time, not ours, at a town meeting to apply common sense and practical thinking. It's a great sentiment. So, finally, I will just end with, I think some people that oppose, as Cynthia said, she was one of those people, oppose it because of the process, maybe not necessarily the merits. And I look at it differently. I think this is an opportunity, and can't we take advantage of it? Can't we be nimble enough, and that was a term my father would use with us growing up, or flexible enough to embrace the unexpected? Isn't that our responsibility and our duty. So I embrace doing this project, and I support it.
No, go ahead. Your turn, Terry.
First of all, Ray and Tim, thank you for the building. It was wonderful. And I'm sorry that the entire building committee is not here. And Dr. Gallo, I was thinking of, it's too bad also that David Clory's not here, because when I chaired the master plan review committee, there first was a master plan. And he would always walk into our master plan review committee with the 3-ring binder, which was probably bigger than a telephone book. And so I'm disappointed he's not here for that.
He did send his greetings and best wishes that
Okay.
we were able to complete the project and open school.
Because the master plan, I think, started like 10 years ago or something like that, so, well, or 06, so I think it's very good that we get that part. To the audience, the people who spoke, and to the people who've written in, thank you for all your input. I have a little bit of a different point of view, because we all know the benefits of turf. So I've been a little confused on this, that it's really, not, in my mind, this whole thing is nothing to do about the turf. As Ray mentioned, it comes down to the process. And what is the process that we take when an appointed body, how does an appointed body go about adding a project like this when it was not on the radar when the project first started? And, you know, Ray, as I just said, Ray mentioned that it comes down to the process. And rightly or wrongly, in the town of Hingham, we vet things, we discuss things, and at the end of the day, we go to town meetings. And the woman who wrote the letter there, I do agree that, you know, you make a good point about the elected body, just go ahead and do it. What I always feel is our job and what we do is we recommend a budget, we recommend a capital expenditure, we vote on that, we debate it, we present it, we have all these budget meetings to tell why we want these things. And so we are advocating for it because we vote for it. So we've made our opinion, but then at the end of the day, the town meeting gets the final blessing. It's almost to me like the way there's checks and balances in our current governmental system. So regardless, our process is going to town meeting. Carol mentioned lawyers. I don't like to think about lawyers because, not that I have anything against lawyers, but I feel everyone then, it's automatically you get defensive. And so, to me, it's not about rights, it's not about authority, it's about working as a community. Under the leadership of the Carol Falvey to the right of me, the Hingham High School Fields Project took many years to accomplish. We have one person who's attended this meeting many times where he has said it's been 20 years. But there was a lot of compromise there. We did, the school committee, in the interest of the town and the community, we conceded on a bunch of things. You know, the turf field is not used during the winter. For outside groups, they're not allowed to use the PA. So again, there was a lot of compromise. And that was something, rightly or wrongly, but that was the precedent the school committee set. And I would think that as we move forward on something like this, we continue to follow that precedent, because at the end of the day, whether it's approved at a town meeting or whether it's, I think it would get approval, but that's the way we got so much approval. That's why we got an 80% vote on not only building the new middle school, but also having the Fields project, because we communicated, we compromised, we vetted, and at the end of the day, everyone got a vote on it. As chair of the Master Plan Review Committee, we advertised the middle school project as a long-term solution, And I remember the Scott Dunlap from AI3, when I asked him in one of the meetings, I said, how do you define a long-term solution? And he said the MSBA defines as a project with a life of 50 years. So if we wanted to have a long-term solution, it required a new middle school. And so we advertised the project as a long-term solution. We also advertised it as not money saved, but less money borrowed. We received the benefit of going into the model school program, which got us a 44% reimbursement. And also at the time of town meeting, Representative Bradley, who was at the ribbon cutting ceremony today, was a huge advocate for us but he also told us it was now or never. So that's how the project was advertised. Now, specifically, as I transfer, and at the end of the day on the new middle school, it went to town meeting and the ballot box, because it was an override, for approval, which it overwhelmingly passed. Now, before transitioning to turf, Ray, you laid out 3 options, option 1, option 2, and option 3. I'm going to paraphrase. Option 3 was to move forward with a design and then possibly go to town meeting. That is the option that, it's just the bottom line, that is what I am supporting or would recommend. As we transition into turf, as I said, I stated before, I love turf. We've had a great first year with it. And also putting turf at the middle school is the path of least resistance. A field has to go there. So, someone's going to get one there. So you can consider it there. Dennis brought up, and also Liza brought up, is that the best place? I do remember, what's that called? Gale Associates. It's on our plan. The very first, we did recommend 2 fields at the high school. I don't know whether or not that's the best place, but I would need to revisit. What also I thought was very interesting when I listened or when I watched the television of the advisory and also the selectmen, the advisory and Paul Healy stated there was too many moving parts, too many unknown. And so that's why I sort of support that we need to find out more. I do support the advisory straw poll to use funds to get the drawing and come to terms and come to the town meeting. One thing that hasn't been discussed, which I would like more debate on, is lights. My recollection of...
Please.
Well, I'm just going to say that. We're going to say this.
I don't want to talk about it in the
Well, because
context of this.
Well, let me just say this, is that lights, in my recollection, was, the thing about turf was always the multiplier. In absence of light, if you have a turf without lights, you have a 1.5 multiplier, as I recall from the meetings. With lights, it's a 2.5. People will argue that if you're going to get the true benefit, it would require lights. So in absence of lights, I think we should have that discussion, because at all those meetings we went to before, it was always the benefit was having lights. So that's why I just think that we do need some more debate on that. The other thing that also, I think a lot of the other points have been already addressed. I would say one other thing is that the reason why I would like to see more discussion is because I think about one vote that we took last year here. And Liza mentioned about some of our expenditures moving forward. What are we going to do with the foster school? Dennis and I voted, we lost in the vote, but Dennis and I voted last year to go in front of the Board of Selectmen for an SOI, Statement of Interest, to go in front of the Massachusetts School Building Authority to be considered for one of their programs. Again, when you think about this pile of money, it's all our money, but what is the best way to spend this money? And is this turf field the best option right now? So I think that I am very pleased and happy with what the building committee has done. I applaud them for bringing this to the attention of us. It does seem like something that we should pursue, but at the end of the day, I'm a person who believes we vet it, we will vote as a body after we analyze everything, we will make a recommendation, and then it hopefully will be blessed at town meeting. And I think that's all I want to say, except, did I have one other thing here from listening to everyone else? I think I'm good right now. If I remember it, I'll come back to it. But again, thank you for all your input and your time.
Thank you, Annie. And just for the record, and for folks on Pine Grove Road who are watching, if the school building committee were to pursue synthetic turf at the middle school, I would not support the installation of lights. It has never been discussed or suggested as part of that project. They were appropriate for the high school. I do not believe that they would be appropriate for the middle school, and I would not support pursuing that. So I just want to get that out of the way so folks don't start being concerned about this moving forward with a discussion about lights. So, Dennis.
So two things. One is, since in a past volunteer life, I was on the advisory committee, and I was actually the person that presented these articles to town meeting. I can say that I feel very confident that whichever way we go with the fields would be within the scope of the original project. Clearly, fields were always part of that project. It was never stated one way or the other. It would be up to the building committee whether they felt comfortable going synthetic turf. Again, I think that's, a financial kind of decision. But I think it should be clear that it clearly was within the scope of the project, and no more than we said how big the courtyard should be, or where the loading dock should be, or whatever, or whether it should be brick or concrete or whatever. So I don't have really too many concerns about that. I do have some concern in terms of, how this supports the educational program. I think that's what one of the things Liza was getting at. So since Margaret's not here, I'm just wondering if Dr. Gallo can address at least, if we install a synthetic turf at the middle school. Do you have any concerns that in any way that would be detrimental to the educational program, from the physical educational program?
No, I don't. I think we would use it. And I think Ray made a good distinguishing point, and that is that, we do have a curriculum for athletics, for PE mainly at the middle school. Intramurals are a big part of the extracurricular program, but there is a PE curriculum across. So I don't think it's a matter of where you play the activities that we play. I do agree with one of the points that Liza made about one of the sketches, and of course those weren't really designs, they were just concepts, but the one that bothered me particularly was the one that seemed to have turf everywhere, and therefore there really wasn't a lot of grass to play some of the non-formal sports, whether that's kickball or whether it's archery or whatever it might be. So that particular design bothered me, and I think took away a lot of the flexibility of a grass space that I think is important to younger students, whether they be younger students at the middle school or not. So I don't see it be a detriment at all. I don't. I know that we would use it. I know that we would use it for PE and that we would use it for turf, but, someone here earlier tonight said, and I said at one other meeting, that is a beautiful facility, and not having a turf field isn't going to take away from the fact that we have a wonderful school for kids. It's only a matter of whether or not we have a playing surface that is one that seems to be more financially advisable. So that the issues really aren't about the middle school and the curriculum. The issues really are about whether this is a good decision now or later, meaning going to town meeting, or whether it's a decision that has more advantages for now rather than later. But I don't see it being related at all to the school program, other than it would be an asset if we had it. If we don't have it, we'll make do as we always have with what we had. But I do think, and I said the other night, that, as a citizen and a community member, we need to do something about the field situation in this town, both in terms of the number of fields and the fact that we need more turf ones. But that's my opinion as a individual citizen.
In light of that,
voter.
again, I think it's important that the school building committee know from our perspective that clearly whatever design you would do, whether it be synthetic turf or natural grass, would need to support the educational program. To Liza's point, you need to talk to Derek and his physical education staff, to Margaret, whoever needs to be involved in that. And, I'm not saying option one is better than option two is option better than three, but I think what Dr. Gallo's saying, I think the points that Liza's making, clearly that needs to support the educational program. It needs to be cost-effective in terms of what you're doing for the town. But I do think, I feel fairly comfortable with the fact that it's certainly within the scope of the original project. I don't think anybody should be concerned that all of a sudden we've decided to expand the scope of the project. Whether it's a cost-effective thing or not, is again, I think, a legitimate thing for the building committee to address. just like you would, I'm sure, when you decided whether to make it cast concrete block or bricks on the exterior of the building or the composition of the parking lot.
Thank you, and I know Ed wants to speak. I want to share one more piece of information. So in addition to the irrigation and the well that I spoke of earlier, we realized somewhat recently that the baseball field that is part of the intended design is not sized for any team who plays in Hingham. It's sized as a 60-80 field, 60 feet 6 inches to the pitching mound and 80 feet between the bases. Little League in this town plays in a 46-60, Babe Ruth 50-70, and the high school 60-90. So the architect always referred to it as a pony league field, and that's a term that's not used that often in this area that frequently anymore. But when we realized that issue, we did talk about it in building committee, and there was consensus, and we actually authorized the architect and the engineer to work on a revision of the design, assuming there was going to be a baseball field included in the project as it currently is designed, and attempt to come up with what's called a convertible size field, which one of the fields at Lynch, I believe, is convertible. So it would accommodate 46-60 and 50-70, and I believe designing it that way would also accommodate softball. So we would address both genders at the same time. Not having interscholastic sports there wasn't really a Title IX concern during the design process, but seeing as though there's an opportunity here because of what we have discovered, we've asked them to move forward with that. So assuming there will be a baseball field there, the design of it will change. And it'll actually be sized down a little bit, so there will be a small credit. It won't cost anything more. Ed, you wanted to?
Thank you, Ray. When I first came on the school committee 4 years ago, I was appointed to the field ad hoc subcommittee that I work among other people with Bill mentioned earlier. And over that period of almost 3 years, became quite familiar with in the benefit of turf versus grass. I don't think there's any question that that we need fields in this town. I live right around the corner from the middle school and have been over there on a spontaneous basis many times over the past 6 to 9 months as things really took shape. And I can remember very clearly one day I was over there, and I was there at noontime, parked my car, and I had to be careful because I was in the middle of outdoor recess. Outdoor recess was right in the middle of the parking lot. And it got my attention. To me, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. This is available. This can be done. That seems to be what the legal beagles tell us. It concerns me to spend any money whatsoever as a stopgap measure. That concerns me. I think to temporize the loan that's been stored and graded, that to possibly be regraded makes no sense to me whatsoever. The issue came up, is this the best location? Well, I don't know if it's the best location. In short of an exhaustive study, which I'm not particularly in favor of, I do feel it's a wonderful location. And our athletic director confirmed that for me the other night. I think it's a terrific location. I have to find out where that small area of grass that the kids supposedly had access to, because I was not familiar. I was not aware of that.
Between the school and the loam pile.
Oh.
It's very small.
So I am absolutely in favor of moving forward. I think it's an absolute mistake not to put in a turf field. Period.
Any other comments? So,
Just,
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
you've been here, I mean, on TV,
Yep.
Tim's been talking a lot.
No, I understand that, but Tim's had opportunities, and he is welcome to raise his hand and get up and speak anytime.
All right.
If he doesn't want to,
I'd be more than happy if you'd like to hear a few thoughts. I came more as an observer tonight, but I'm
Right.
happy to give you some reactions to the debate if you think that would be helpful.
Yes, I would welcome that.
Good evening, Tim Collins, Lantern Lane. I'm the vice chair of the building committee, but here in a personal capacity, obviously. Our committee is technically scheduled a meeting here, but there's only two of us. We don't have a quorum, but we don't have a consensus yet on our committee. I'll just sort of randomly address a couple of the thoughts that I've had as I listened to some of the comments. First, with regard to the scope of the project that was brought to town meeting, I think it's a little bit of revisionist history to suggest that baked into that plan was the possibility of a turf upgrade if the building committee saw fit. If you assume, based on the estimates of somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 and the December estimate of $1.3 million, that a conservative estimate on a field would be $800,000 to $1 million. I would suggest to you that the vote at town meeting would have been $61,910,920 or thereabouts. So not a $61 million number, a $62 million number. The contingency budget that was in that $61 million number never included any upgrades, whether it be for a skating rink or a walking track or a turf field. So I think it's a little revisionist to suggest that somewhere towards the end of the project, we would decide what the fields were going to be. They were always going to be grass, and they were always in the initial estimates. But again, that would be my view of what we put in front of town meeting. In terms of the costs, there's no question that there are benefits to turf fields. I am a supporter of turf fields, but I'm a bigger supporter, as some have suggested here and in other meetings, of proper process. When person after person says, well, the middle school seems like a good location for a handful of reasons, but no one can point to a process that I think a majority of town could support in terms of pointing to a study that was put together that says this is the best location. If a committee that spent a lot of time on it suggested 2 fields at the high school was the right way to go, then I would suggest that maybe if a second turf field is right and it's the right time and a right amount of money to spend on it is now, it should be at the best location, not at a convenient location that sort of evades a lot of the town process that's in place. Again, just my view, I think, having lived here for just over a decade, which I know makes me sort of like a carpetbagger and a newbie, but I also grew up in Sandwich, which is a town down the Cape that has town meeting, and I've been to hundreds and hundreds of, or not hundreds, but numerous town meetings, including as a kid. I understand how town meeting works, and I understand process, and I think it's extraordinarily, extraordinarily important. And so I guess the last thing I would just leave you with is that I've heard a lot of people in different capacities sort of say, well, if I was thinking with a variety of different hats, I might have a different outcome, but I'm going to put some of those fiscal hats away and put this hat away and put that hat away, and I'm just going to narrowly focus my vote or my advisory opinion on a very specific fact. And I would just suggest that people talk about different committees, whether they're appointed or elected. If you will, I'm paraphrasing it. It seems to be the suggestion as to whether or not people have the guts to act or not act. We, the building committee, those of us who've been on it since the beginning, have spent almost $90 million. We know how to spend people's money, but I would argue that we know how to do it prudently. We've never had an issue like this, and the suggestion that we should authorize ourselves a blank check, whether that's just design or for the entire project, is just beyond what I appreciate as the responsibility of the building committee. I may very well be wrong, but I think when this was first brought to the building committee, my personal suggestion at that meeting in December was, this is bigger than the building committee. This is the town's money. We're trying very hard to deliver on time and under budget, and I would love for the town to decide what its capital priorities are, whether they be fields, a senior center, any number of projects. None of those have been addressed, and people, person after person, keeps saying, gee, I wish there was a plan, or I wish we knew the town's priorities. I wish there was a $20 million bucket that I could ladle out $800,000 for a turf field here and $1 million for a turf field there, and a new senior center. That bucket doesn't exist, nor does a bucket exist to replace not just the high school carpet in 15 years, but this one. So there's a lot of presumed money out there, but the reality is, if we spend the money and authorize ourselves to do it, we have to go borrow the money, the town of Hingham, and people have to pay that back. There has been some amount of recovery, as people say, on Wall Street, but on any street USA, including any street Hingham, that recovery has not been uniform. And so I think it's, for me, why I go back to the process being the most important thing. It's presumptuous to assume that 7 people can spend close to $1 million on an upgrade that was never in the plan. And I think, as Dr. Gallo said a month or so ago, this issue now being squarely in front of the building committee, since we have this authority, I don't know why that keeps coming up. There's no one on the building committee has suggested once that we don't have the authority. It's whether or not it's the right thing to do. But as Dr. Gallo said, now that this is in front of us, and just the 7 of us, we will be criticized by some. I promise you that is a true statement. And I promise you, as I stand here tonight and our meeting coming up, I would happily be criticized for saving the town money instead of spending the town money outside of the proper process, in my view. If that's what people want to criticize me for, and if that's the decision, that we come to next month, I can sleep on that. I can't sleep on a process that kind of goes around town process, and in particular the suggestion that if we want to, we could authorize ourselves at least the design. But that has to be constrained to the middle school. As you've heard repeatedly, the only way that we can spend some of this $61 million is at the middle school. That precludes all other locations, whether they be better or not, whether they be lighted or not. I appreciate Ray saying that we have never, in our capacity, considered lights. We also really haven't fully considered what the design might look like. But I can promise you, if you put a turf field there, at some point, someone is going to ask if it can be lighted. I think it's all of the studies about turf fields show that the extra use comes from added time. Most of the added time in New England comes from having lighted fields because, as you know, very soon, summer's over and it gets dark. So I would just say I really appreciate all of the discussion. I read all the letters that have been shared with me. Some have tended in the last few weeks to get fairly personal. I would ask us all to, I think, at the Selectmen's meeting, one of the finer comments was when Selectman Paul said to Selectman Paul, let's just agree to disagree. One way or another, our building committee, our 7 unelected committee members have to make a decision. I actually would rather we didn't have to, and I would rather this had gone to town meeting this year, and either a committee to study the best location or just a sense of the town, how they wanted to spend their money had been taken. One way or another, we'll have to make a decision. I promise you, we do know how to act, we do know how to make decisions. We will step up to the plate to make a decision, and we will be criticized, and that's okay. I guess that came with putting our hand up to help build the school, but I would just suggest that when you're making recommendations for how another body might act, you take that all into account, and just the history of precedent and the concept that a committee with a surplus, and it's not a surplus because the money isn't there, but additional funds in a contingency budget could just be used for whatever, is not how I'm aware the town has done business in the 10 and a half, 11 years that I've lived here or other towns. So I would just leave you with those thoughts, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you.
I have a question,
Yeah,
Jim,
sure.
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
First and foremost, thank you for your service. I know it's not easy, and it's hard when you find yourself in a leadership position, and you're going to make some people sad and some people happy. I'm just wondering if you're willing, if this does go to town meeting, and we do get a positive vote, is your committee willing to stay on and see this through?
Well, that's a difficult question, because I think the first part of that is that what would go to town meeting? There are some who would like simply the issue of using appropriated funds to go to turf field at the middle school. I'm not sure that advisory would craft that vote. So the vote might be to put a turf field at the best place in town. If that wasn't at the middle school, certainly that would be a new committee. And if it happened to be the town decides they want to put one at the middle school, that would be up to individual committee members as to whether they would stay on for another X period of time.
So let's clarify that point for a minute. Ray, this money that, perhaps would be used to build a turf field, it can only be used at the middle school, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So it has to be crafted that way.
Well, or it could be crafted to ask the town if they would like another turf service to, comments made about sometimes the process takes a little longer than people with immediate needs for their kids would like. But the right process might be, just like we have a master plan for the schools, to have a master plan for fields and capital expenditure. I think that gets lost a lot in this discussion about accelerating turf fields because we have weather issues in New England, but there isn't an unlimited amount of funds, as people at advisory said. And so the fact that the next capital outlay might very well not be a turf field project. It might have to wait if it's not private funds. So I'm not sure what the vote crafted for town meeting would be, and that would be between advisory, I think, and the selectmen to figure out whether they would allow a super narrow vote or perhaps even a competing vote that said, let's find the best location for a turf field, bring that cost back, and let's vote on that instead.
Right, and I think Dennis, to that point, made a good point about, whether using town money someplace else might make sense, and that would obviously be part of some other project at some other time. And I think the concern of some, at least that has been brought to my attention, is some other time that would not take advantage of the opportunity that folks recognize now. And that's how it was presented to me, last year when I originally brought it to the rest of the committee, is that folks saw it as an opportunity and asked, is this something that could be pursued? But it's certainly a fair point. The town can decide how it wants to spend its money, whether it's, in the confines of this project or outside of it. But we are all part of the town and taxpayers as well. So our opinion is important.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim. Dennis.
Comment. Since I may be the only one that's talked about wearing multiple hats, and I wear hats a lot because I don't have a lot to protect up here. The point I was attempting to make was, as a member of the school committee, I think our responsibility is to have a middle school that meets our educational program and do it in a responsible way. And so my thinking is, and I don't know what the intention is, whether we're going to have a straw vote or we're just going to express our opinions or whatever, but, my thinking would be something along the lines that, I wouldn't have, assuming that it meets the criteria that Liza stated, which I think is an important one, that it meets the educational program at the school, that it meets the needs that the kids have at the school and that the staff wants it to have. Clearly, that would be a qualification. But beyond that, I would not have a problem if the building committee decided that the best way to do that was a artificial or a synthetic turf field. That's kind of the way I'm leaning. I don't feel a strong desire that it needs to happen, but again, I don't think it's only my opinion. I think if the building committee were to, and I could have a long discussion with Tim about that probably, if the building committee were to decide that was the best way to meet the educational program at the school in a cost-effective way, within the scope of the original project that said there should be fields there to support the school, I wouldn't have a problem with that, not going to town meeting. But that's only me speaking.
Yeah, and just, since the advisory meeting, I haven't said anything publicly about, my feelings on it, and I will share it with the rest of the building committee. But I want it to be clear that, because folks saw this issue brought up by me at the selectmen's meeting, and I just want to reiterate that I brought it up because people asked me to. And it's not me saying, ooh, I want turf, so let's do it. My concern, first and foremost, is for this project. What we celebrated today was a wonderful event, but we're not done. We have more work to finish. And I want to make sure that that project is finished to the best of our ability, that on time, based on the current schedule, to the extent that that's physically possible, and I think it is, and under budget. And I feel confident that it will be one way or the other, whether we pursue synthetic turf or we don't. I have a real concern with a delay that a town meeting next April might cause. I think it'll hinder the schedule that we're on. I think it'll slow down our ability to complete the site work. I think it'll make it more challenging, and we're talking about 8 months from now that we would get a decision, and then that's when we would be able to pursue anything should the building committee see fit. So I don't know the answer to that. I'd be happy if we finish this project as it's designed with grass. I think adding irrigation to it would be a terrific addition. But I also believe that installing synthetic turf will make it even a more valuable asset for this community. And I see my responsibility. I mean, Tim has talked about being a watchdog and his responsibility that he acknowledges. I agree with that responsibility, and I take that seriously as well. But I see my role as having another responsibility, and that's because I do wear two hats, and that's to the folks in town who elected me, and they have spoken loud and clear, and they have asked to see if we can pursue turf. And personally, I have seen the benefits of turf. I have seen the success of turf after just a short period of time at the high school, and I see the added value that would provide to this project. Financially, I believe it's a sound decision under the circumstances. I understand some reservations that folks may have without having a definitive design and concrete costs in hand. But those aren't where we are now, and to get to those it's not a huge, giant step. So, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on September 3rd. I don't know how questions are going to be crafted and what our discussion is how our discussion is going to unfold. But, I'm very pleased with the project. I was thrilled this afternoon. Thanks for all who came and shared that with us. And, certainly would listen to other opinions. And, I don't know, Carol, you have a suggestion?
I don't know. What do people, do you want to take a straw vote? Or do we just leave it at this? I think people's...
I think they have to vote. I think,
yeah. I think you know
Yeah.
how people feel in this committee, and it would seem that there's a majority in favor of going with the turf field, but I don't think we need to take a vote necessarily. We've all expressed ourselves pretty clearly, I think.
Yeah, I think all of us, or almost all of us, support the concept of turf and see the value of that. Certainly some have expressed a concern about the process and a desire to see this go to a town meeting vote, but there, I think, are a number of us who don't necessarily perhaps think that that's necessary. It is a school building committee decision.
Well, I would just like to add to my comments, because I specifically didn't talk about whether going to town meeting or not, because I felt I had other relevant issues that hadn't been raised. But I do feel it's important that it goes to town meeting, because the way the project was presented to the town and how the understanding of the costs, this is added on. And there were other things that other people wanted that were taken away. There are other items that are on the list from the staff that are wanted and have not been added on yet. And so that for then private citizens to come and say, we want something added, I really feel that's out of the normal process. And so if we're going to add a significant dollar and element to the program, that deserves to go back to town meeting, so.
Any other comments?
Well, I guess the question is, should we do like the other committees or not? Because they took the straw polls.
I'm willing to take a straw vote if
I mean,
people
I don't
want,
know.
how do people feel about it? Dennis, Carol, Liza, Ed,
Why not
match what they've done?
the two
Sure.
votes from the AdCom?
The two questions.
Two questions.
Right.
Two.
So the first question is whether or not this the school building committee needs to go to town meeting before making a decision on whether to install a turf field.
I think it makes sense to ask them in reverse order,
Okay?
right? I think, do you support the concept of turf? Do you support the school building committee pursuing turf as part of the middle school project?
Okay.
I think that's,
Good.
Well, the way I remember.
I'm not asking the questions that advisory asked.
Well, the thing was like, do you support?
I know what the questions were at advisory. I'm not asking those
That's
questions.
what Dr. Ed said, though.
I understand.
Right. So that was.
Well,
his
the Board of
recommendation.
Selectmen also had different questions, I believe. I think they asked about, do you support turf as their question?
Right. I mean, we can ask 4 questions, 5 questions, whatever it is. I think, the very basic concept is, do you support the school building committee pursuing the installation of synthetic turf as part of the middle school project? I think it's a very basic question. Either you support the turf as part of the project or you don't.
The only thing I would add is pending, given that it meets all the, educational programmatic needs of the middle school.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, because, again, Dr. Gallo mentioned, and that there's some concern, whether it's archery or whatever, that we need to have a place for that, and there needs to be an option that allows for those programmatic needs. I think that was Liza's concern as well, and I think it's a valid concern.
So
What would the second question be then?
I think the second question would be, assuming you support turf, do you believe the school building committee should seek town meeting approval
Okay.
before proceeding?
So do you want to go down the line? Like,
Raise our hands.
how do you want to handle it?
The first question is support turf, so assume that's a motion? I mean, you want to just take a straw poll?
Let's
So
take a
just
straw poll and raise our
Who
hands.
thinks the school building committee should pursue the installation of synthetic turf at the middle school?
Assuming it meets the programmatic needs,
programmatic
middle
needs.
school.
Right.
I do in qualifications, I don't know if that's the best location, but I love turf.
Well, part of the question is at the middle school, so it's either a yes or a no.
Well, that's a tough one.
There's no
because-
other option. It's a simple question.
Now, well, third question. All right, so, yes, I support the concept at the middle school.
Okay,
but,
so that's 6.
Okay.
But everyone knows my qualification.
And who does
Sure.
not?
No.
You're a no.
And the second question is?
6 to 1.
So I guess,
Assuming you
Liza,
support.
if you don't support the pursuing turf at all, then the next vote is irrelevant to you, because you don't support turf, so it doesn't matter whether we go to town meeting or not.
No, that's process.
No, I understand. Either you support turf, it doesn't matter how we pursue it, either you support pursuing turf or not. It's that simple, not how it's pursued, but, so if you don't support pursuing turf, then it doesn't matter what the process is.
I support sticking with what we have.
Right.
And taking time to investigate the issue further. So,
Okay,
as
that's not a
far as,
question.
I know, it's not the question, so.
So the
just wanna
second
go with
question
what
was,
I-
assuming the support, do you want to seek town meeting approval before proceeding?
Okay, so I would just suggest
Okay.
that, to me, the issue is kind of, we value engineered a bunch of things out of the program. To me, the question is, should we value engineer this into the program? And by that, I mean, if the building committee were to conclude that this was a good value, a cost-effective way to meet the programmatic needs of the middle school, I would say they don't need to go to town meeting. If, on the other hand, as I think where Tim was coming from, and not to put words in his mouth, if the school building committee were to come to the conclusion, hey, this might be a good idea, but it's not worth spending $1 million on, that value is not there, then I think I would have a concern of not going to town meeting for that. So I don't know, it's a, I'm trying not to nuance it too much, but the idea is, to me, based on what I've heard, it sounds like it's a cost-effective way to add value to the middle school project to meet our programmatic needs. However, once you get the information back and you say, hey, we found out there's ledge out there, or there's whatever, and it's now a $2 million field or something, I would say, well, wait a second, that's probably no longer a cost-effective way to do that.
So, assuming the school building committee was interested in pursuing this,
Right.
and assuming they decided to agree to seek town meeting approval, I presume that there would be a design and there would be a cost that was presented to town meeting. Because when we go to town meeting, we don't vote on a sketch and no real cost. Now, granted, when we approved this project, we had a number that was based on a formula and a schematic design that was being refined. But we didn't have concrete cost estimates yet. But it was based on a tried and true formula that was dictated by the MSBA and based on a design from another school by an architect who was a professional in the business. But I would suggest that the school building committee would go through that process, and that by the time they got to town meeting, they would have a design and they would have a cost. And I would suggest that if it ended up being, a prohibitive cost, that either, number one, we wouldn't go forward to town meeting because it would not be affordable with the remaining contingency funds, which is what we're talking about. Or two, if it did go forward to town meeting, that it would be defeated. Or not get recommended by the advisory committee, which votes on all warrant articles.
Yeah, but I thought what we were saying is, again, to me, the issue is if the school building committee said that they thought it was a cost-effective appropriate value way to meet the needs of the school, I think they have the ability to do that. If, on the other hand, it becomes cost prohibitive at some point, then I think you need to go to town meeting. If I'm the only one that sees it that way, I can live with it.
Well, I think the question is, should we go to town meeting or not? And then, obviously, there's going to be qualification.
You think town meeting under certain circumstances? That's what
Yeah,
I'm getting.
yeah, exactly.
It was over a certain
I'm saying, I think it's clearly within the scope of the project to have fields there, and if the building committee were to say this is the synthetic turf is the most cost-effective way to do that and add value to the project, I have no problem with that.
I don't know what the rationale might be for the school building committee's decision one way or the other. So I can't, it's hard to confine to that set of facts. But-
So the original second question we had was, assuming there was support, do they need to seek town meeting approval
Or should
before?
they? Should they?
Should they seek town meeting approval before proceeding?
And a no vote would mean?
No.
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 They simply
Make
do
the
it.
decision.
Make the decision.
Correct.
So I would say yes.
Vote yes.
Well, you didn't support it, though.
But that doesn't really matter.
This is a different question.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because the process, she
Assuming
loses, just because the
support.
majority
Okay.
rules against doesn't mean she can't have an opinion on the process.
I think they should go to town meeting.
So 3 people, okay, so 3 go to town meeting.
Did you vote or no? I didn't.
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say no.
Like I say, I have a,
It's yes or no?
I think I have to abstain.
Well, you can, somebody on advisory committee.
Can I pull in Andy and say that I support what they decide? And if they don't think they need to go to town meeting, you
Yeah,
can
I
do
mean,
it.
That's my point.
My inclination would be it should be a unanimous vote of the school building committee.
Never be enough.
It's not going to be
No,
unanimous.
so I'm abstaining.
So it's 3-3.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, and frankly, I wouldn't support seeking town meeting approval if it were town meeting next April, because I think that would delay the project and would be a detriment to the project. That's not to say there couldn't be a special town meeting.
Right.
Wouldn't, had nothing to do with what we would seek, as far as I'm concerned. But in general, I would,
You know how I feel about special town meeting.
I would vote no. So, is that 3-3 with 1 abstention, Dennis?
Call you?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what?
3-3 with 1 abstention.
3-3 with 1 abstention.
And frankly, if it was 4-3 or 3-4, I think you're giving the same message, right?
Dennis is abstaining.
The fact is, we're split pretty much down the middle as to whether it's a good idea or not to go to town meeting, right?
Can we end on a high note and say thank you again to the building committee?
Yes, thank you very much.
As somebody that was there at maybe your first meeting in 2006 or whatever it was, I can only imagine, and thankfully.
That's Amy, he was there.
And I thankfully I was there all through East School and the beginning of the middle school, and then, since then, not. It's a tremendous amount of work. And Tim and the rest of the group, including Alan and others that didn't make it to the second phase, put in a tremendous amount of time and did a great job. No question about it. Make sure you wash up.
What about would you support them spending money for the design? I mean, that was the other,
Well, I think,
an interim, right?
so I think,
That was the second question.
yeah, I mean, we could ask a third question, but I think frankly that if you support the concept of turf, if you support the school building committee pursuing turf,
You need that information.
you need that information to go to town meeting.
And you phrased
Maybe
it
you don't need that information not to go to town meeting. And if you don't need that information
Because you're not
because you're not
going.
going to town meeting, then maybe the thinking is why spend that money, why take that extra step? Because it's going to be part of the moving forward process.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, unless I'm missing something here, if the committee were to decide to move forward, you'd have to do all the engineering studies and everything
That's right,
anyway.
of course.
Yeah. So you'd then you'd have a fail-safe for another stop that says, hey, we found out now it costs, the estimate is this, or the plans look like that. Right.
Right, no, exactly, and that's why, I really appreciate the fact that we've gone through this process, and I appreciate the fact that advisory spent the kind of time that they did on it. But in my personal, humble opinion, that vote was not informative to me, it was not helpful to me, because they are the trustees, they are the custodians for town meeting. So of course, they're going to suggest it should go to town meeting, because in their minds, that's what things should always do. So I don't know that was informative to me, personally. Andy?
But real quickly, when he asked the question about supporting the design fee, in the big scheme of things, that's a very small amount of money for a $60 million project. Didn't you estimate it around like 35, 45,000? Or if we want designs, for designs?
Wasn't it around
was it?
40,000?
50 plus if you look at the pair documents.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so even in the big scheme of a project, of a 60...
It's a small number.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I think, going to your point, if you support the turf, you're going to realize that there's a cost to supporting that idea.
Right.
Okay, we have to get going here. Let's
Yes.
go.
Yeah. Okay,
All right.
we're good.
Moving
Thank you.
on. Thanks, everybody. The next 12 items are appointments. New folks we welcome to the district. We have 4 resignations, including 1 retirement, our payroll supervisor. We certainly wish her well, but not yet.
Good line.
We have a full year leave of absence notification, and we have some salary advancements, folks moving to additional educational column levels. Subcommittee and project reports. Ed, did you have something you wanted to share?
I would. I'd like to do a thank you and congratulations to the SNAP group for their summer project, the SNAP being the Special Needs Athletic Partnership that ran a program at the South Shore Country Club July 7 through August 1st, 4 weeks, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. for special needs kids. It was 5 days a week for 4 weeks. There were 29 participants with 33 mentors, a program coordinator. Kathleen Mazzelli was singled out as doing a wonderful job, a tennis pro, a bowling coordinator, and a golf pro. The activities included tennis, golf, bowling, and indoor games when weather was necessary. This helped a group provided recreation for age group of age 4 to 20 with various degrees of special needs. A very favorable response from the parents, the mentors, the participants. This was the first year It was set for a maximum of 50 kids, and they had 29 participants. And in no small part, this was should single out a very generous donation of $7,000 from the Hingham Rotary. All privately funded, and kudos to all the people that worked on it.
Great.
It was.
Thank you, Ed. I know policy has been busy, but that's evident.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would like to mention is that we are very seriously and thoughtfully working on the review of the third section of the policy manual, which has to do with school committee and committee structures and all kinds of stuff. And it's our target to complete that by the end of this year. And at that point, then determine how long it might take to finish the rest of the policy manual.
I'll just remind people that we're having our celebration on September 20th for the fields, our ribbon cutting ceremony and a day of events, so there'll be some press releases about that in September.
We have our big scissors.
We have our big scissors, and they work today.
Getting our money's worth.
Better deal than renting.
Several of us held our breath.
That's great.
Anything else?
I don't think so. Nothing new to report on either project.
No bills to sign or anything?
Well, we're going to go into
Do
executive
we have,
session.
okay, we do have a couple of invoices, so you want to, yeah, we might as well deal with those. I'm waiting for, just on the high school fields project, I'm waiting for, and expect very soon, an updated outstanding punch list. As you know, there was bleacher repair work
That was going on last week.
Right. There's some additional work that's going to be done under the warranty, a condition that was found on the track side. And there is more landscaping that's going to be done when the weather, as we move into September, likely.
Before September 20th.
But we are very close to finalizing.
One thing that you and I haven't talked about, as I look at some of the magnitude of the winter kill and some of the shrubs on my street, and I think everybody's experienced it on their neighborhoods. Did we have much winter kill? I must admit, when I go to the fields, I'm looking at other issues. Was there much winter kill in the plantings?
There was.
There was. Has that been?
They did replace a number of things.
I'm going to attempt to take a peek at that. I haven't.
By the multipurpose on the,
yeah.
On the other side of the boulevard, if you will.
How about the living fence along Downing Street?
That did very well, I think, during the winter.
Must be protected.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And it also was planted early.
Right,
Yeah.
it was there earlier.
That's true.
They did a lot of that planting in the late summer.
Just a shame some of the stuff on our just a short section of street that I live on. Just amazing.
Right.
Should make a motion?
Yeah, so this is good news. We have the final invoice from Seaver, who was the contractor for the concession building. So that's excellent.
How many invoices do we have here?
2.
There's 2.
Would you do me a favor?
Yep.
Right, would you just jot down for me what they are?
Here, we have an extra one. Can I give you that?
You can have that.
Have that. We don't have to draw it
No, I have
down.
an explanation.
I'll write on
Yeah.
that. We have that. That's fine.
Helen's not looking at me.
Wow. All right, I'm going to make a motion that we pay Power Corporation invoice number 13, $2,590.12.
That's for project management services associated with the high school fields improvement project for essentially the month of June.
Wow.
2014.
Second?
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Second invoice is Seaver Construction Incorporated, their final bill for $15,456.00.
That's been approved by Gail
Okay.
and PAR. Yep.
I
No.
dropped it off.
Yep, no, I see that.
15,456
15,456.
even. So that's my motion.
And you're going to give me a notice?
I am.
Okay.
Second from Dennis.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Here. Send that. Three of those. Same.
Okay. Want me to make a motion? Ed,
For where are we?
go into executive.
Oh,
I'm trying to
yes.
move it
So,
along.
we're done with those reports. No other 48-hour items, Dot?
No.
Okay.
I would just say not a 48-hour item, but we have the new teacher orientation on Monday morning at 8. All of you are certainly welcome to attend that. I know Carol will make some comments, as will Irma. And on Wednesday, we have the convocation, a little bit different this year in a number of ways. It's going to be at the middle school. We have a plan for parking and shuttles and so on. But the coffee piece of it will start at 7:45 and go till 8:15. And we will hopefully get into that auditorium promptly at 8:15 because we have kind of a special event this year, and therefore the program will be a little bit longer. And so I would just make it clear for those of you who enjoy coming that we'll have some comments in the beginning, then we'll have some required training we have to do, but the special event will follow that necessarily so that, you know, for those of you who want to come and see the whole thing, you'll have kind of a 40-minute coffee break in between. But it's okay however long you choose to come.
Look forward to it. Great. Well, we do have a need for a brief executive session. So, Carol, you want to make that motion?
I'm going to make a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to regular session, to discuss contract negotiation strategies with HEA units A and B.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Going down the line.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.